Okay. Okay, good afternoon. Let's get this work session started. It's August 20th, 2025. Time is 4 p.m. In attendance are six board members, Director Art, Director Jurgensen, Director Hafley, Director Melpackham, Director Bankus, and Director Carey. And we have some of the superintendent's team in attendance as well. The first item on the agenda is the board vacancy candidate interviews. I will provide some context and then we'll go through this. We announced earlier this month the board currently has a board vacancy. At the August 6th board meeting, the board through resolution invited qualified applicants to submit their application, and Superintendent Gall is joining us as well. And the board established some guidelines for that application process itself. 4 qualified candidate applications were received for the board vacancy. The candidate packets for those in the community, the candidate packets along with the bio, resume, all that information is available for the public to view on the new board website, where the board meetings are there. It's the Diligent website. Today, the board will have an opportunity to spend some time with each of the 4 interested candidates through a public interview process. Again, as a reminder, this board director appointment is for a short term, and the appointed board member will serve in this capacity for the next approximately 4 months until after the November elections, at which point in time the newly elected board members will be sworn in for the next 4 years. The order in which the candidates will appear in front of the board this evening was picked at random. And so we'll have our first candidate, Ms. Huber, joining us in a minute. Before we bring the first candidate in, I'll share briefly the process. To ensure consistency and fairness, each of the candidate will be asked the same set of questions. Board members, the questions were shared with you last week. A printed copy is in front of you. I will start with the opening comment question and then go through the board, and each one of you can, I'll call out your name and then you can ask one of the subsequent questions that's there. So be ready to ask that question when I come to you. After the interview process is completed this evening, the board will receive an informal straw poll. Please complete that straw poll by noon tomorrow. This will show if there is a clear top choice candidate. If that is the case, the board will formally vote to approve that top choice candidate, that selection, at the September 3rd board meeting. Following that approval, we will have a swearing-in ceremony at the September 3rd board meeting for the new board member. The entire process, various steps I shared with the board. The process received approval from the district's legal counsel, Ms. Deb Menkins. And lastly, I would say, just to protect the integrity of the process, I would suggest that board members not publicly discuss their candidate choices. We will discuss this publicly at a board meeting, but not outside of the board meeting. That's what I meant. Any questions, board, at this point in time? Okay. With that, the first candidate we are inviting and who is joining us at this time is Ms. Amanda Huber. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your willingness to step in, complete the application packet, and your willingness to serve in this capacity as well. You will, just to set what is going to happen at this time, you will have an opportunity to introduce yourself, an opening statement, and a closing statement to the board as well. In between that opening and closing, we have identified 5 questions to ask you. With the opening, closing, and the 5 questions, there are approximately 7 components out there. Ms. Olson will, as you can see, set the clock for a total of 18 minutes for the entire process, roughly about 2 to 2.5 minutes for each question, but that's something for you to monitor. If you want to take extra time answering one of the questions, that's up to you, but then you may have lesser time later on to answer another question. There will be a hard stop at 18 minutes, okay? Any questions from you, Ms. Huber, at this time? Okay. Ms. Olson, you can start the clock. And I will start with the first question to you, Ms. Huber. Start by introducing yourself to the board and also the community, who you are, your background, what experiences or skill set that you bring to this process that will help you serve in this capacity, highlighting specifically any relevant connections you have with district level.
Hi, I'm Amanda Huber. I know all of you. It's good to see familiar faces in here. I'm a mom of 6 kids, including foster kids. My kids have spanned across 8 different schools here in D11, so I've got a lot of experiences with various communities within D11. I have previously served as the budget subcommittee chair for the district. I've been involved in PTA, SAC. Every once in a while there's a random committee that pops up and closes down when work gets done, and I've worked on a few of those. So I am here to help, and I've served as that chair where I reviewed budgets, aligned resources with district priorities. I have quite a bit of experience, and I think the thing that I'll be able to bring into this would be I can come in on day one, not going to need as much training. I'm very familiar with everyone in this room and the different committees that the district works with and the superintendent.
Okay, thank you. I'll come to you, Vice President Haefre. Question 1.
Hi. Why are you interested in serving in this short-term position on the board? What's your motivation for being part of this governance team?
I would like to assist in fulfilling the vision that's already been set for the district and helping fulfill those priorities. And I think that at this point in time, it's a very short appointment period, so that stability is really going to matter. It's going to be something that we need to see through the things that we've started and not start a lot more things until we've completed what's already in progress. So, one area that inspires me, I do a lot with extracurricular activities throughout the district with robotics, kids in various different sports and activities. So that's been a fun way to stay engaged. I look forward to engaging with that community further, assisting with partnerships and developing just trust, support, and faith in the community here in D11.
Thank you.
Jason, I'll come to you, Director Jorgensen. Next question.
Next question is, what's your understanding of the role of a school board director?
So the school board director's position is very different from the superintendent's. So you will be responsible for the vision, some of these priorities. You're going to set the policies, and then even though he's a very visionary leader, he is going to set the operations. So the school board director is not supposed to be involved in operations, and you're supposed to oversee the what, and while the superintendent and his team figures out the how.
Dr. Ott.
Question 3. In your opinion, what is the primary challenge facing District 11, and how would you address it?
I've got time, so I'm going to pause on that one. I think the biggest challenge right now has to do with academic achievement. Our test scores for 30% in math, 45% proficient in English. Those numbers are not acceptable, and I think the district has put a lot of investment into improving that, and they are going to continue to improve those numbers. That in order to be able to improve that, they are going to have to invest in even more in high quality instruction. And I think that will be the biggest challenge that faces the district, and how they're going to strategize, whether it is staff training, the kind of resources that they're bringing in the schools, the kind of interventions that they're doing with the kids. I think they've got to be really methodical in that process for how they are going to move from this space into the goal that's set, which obviously the goal would be for every student to leave high school reading, writing, and doing math well.
Thomas.
When making decisions for the district, what principles and priorities would guide your thinking?
I think you've got to keep in mind that we're here for the students. So I think a student-centric mindset is imperative. Whatever else is going on in the world, we need to keep our eyes on what is happening right here with the students that are right here. I think that we also need to be data-driven and focus on that, and really to pull into what's working and what isn't working, and be responsive to those changes that need to be had. I also think listening, families, teachers, staff, they have provided valuable input. The reason that I'm here today is because I saw that this board was valuing parent input, and the more you offer it, the more receptive you all are. It's been a very receptive board to parent voice and family input. So I think listening to that community while also being able to filter through what common themes are we hearing and what are we staying true to our mission consistently over time.
Tell us about a time you worked with people who had different priorities or perspectives than your own and how you handled this situation.
So I was the chair of the budget subcommittee previously. It's a room full of people and there's a lot of times very different opinions on things. I think what we do well is when we collaborate and work together and you can kind of hear shared themes throughout different times and you say, is this part of the agenda? Are we going to be focused on, is this sticking to the agenda? Is this what we put on our charges? If not, we move along. We find some common ground and we come back together and we do try to always have a united message when we bring things forward to the community and to the board. Does that answer that question? I guess.
Is there anything else you want to add? That are you good?
I have a question. I think that's good.
Okay, so we are at the end of the interview pretty much, so I'm going to ask you to make a closing statement at this point in time. It's kind of an elevator speech. If you were asking the community to vote for you, what would you say to the community to convince them to choose you? And in closing, is there anything else the board should consider while making this decision? So you've got 11 minutes, Ms. Huber, if you want to take the 11 minutes.
I'm glad I'm on the arm wrestling match downstairs. No, I think I bring stability, student first mindset. I'm always there to help. I've tried to do that consistently throughout the district. I've worked with budgeting, planning, some community processes. I try to do as much outreach as I could possibly do in our community. I don't think that there's probably a school in D11 that I haven't been in before. If this were an election, I'd ask for the community's trust because I've shown that through years of service, but it's not. So I'm committed to working hard, listening carefully, and continuing the board's work this time.
Okay.
And they're gonna be, sorry, I should have taken a little bit longer. You know, I could start telling jokes if you'd like. We'll get out of here. We've got some great candidates.
I'm always happy to take back time if I need to fill the air for 10 minutes.
Well,
And I think that that's another thing too that I would bring to the board. It's like,
telling jokes?
yes.
Okay.
But thank you for your time, and I'm sure you've got some excellent applicants down there, so I look forward to working with you all in the future, however this goes.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And you can stay in the room if you choose to. You don't have to go back once
There's
the process
access
is complete.
to back to school nights tonight, so.
Okay, great.
I'll go across that.
Yeah, you've got other priorities, please do.
The next one is
Nicole went to get Chip is next, correct?
Chip, okay. Chip Forrest X is the next candidate.
I got that order right, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I see it.
Just making sure that. Should probably self-reflect on why that is.
Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Yep.
I see I'm not overdressed. I was gonna do that, and I thought, no, it's probably not a good idea.
You're interviewing with them, not with me.
I
so
know.
You matched the right dress.
That's exactly why I didn't do that.
Thank you, Mr. X. Thank you for your willingness to step into this vacancy role, complete the application, and serve in this capacity if selected. Quickly going through the process for this evening, you will have an opportunity to introduce yourself, make an opening statement, and then also a closing statement to the board. In between the opening and the closing, the board has identified 5 questions, which we'll go around the room asking you. So between the opening statements, closing statements, and the 5 questions, there are 7 components. You have a total of 18 minutes. You can use the 18 minutes however you choose to. You can take a longer time answering one question, and you'll have a shorter time answering the rest of the questions at the end. There will be a hard stop at 18 minutes. Any questions from you at this time?
No.
Okay, great. So, Ms. Olson, you can start the clock, and I'll start with the first question. Introduce yourself to the board and the community, who you are, your background, what experience and skill set that you bring to this process and to serve in the board member capacity, highlighting specifically any relevant connections to District 11. Thank you.
All right, well, let me start by saying I am seeking this position on the Board of Education because I believe I can meaningfully contribute to the board's work. My resume outlines my background experience in District 11, as well as my community service to outside organizations here in Colorado and Colorado Springs. I've watched several different boards work tirelessly to make District 11 all that it could be. My observation, with few exceptions, led me to believe that the solutions were basically the same old approach with different names, with hope that the results would be different. With few exceptions, in my view, they were not. When this board was elected, I observed a very different approach in your governing philosophy. In the past, I noticed board policy was at times very operational in nature, not allowing for much innovation or room for change. Now, district policy is broad enough to allow for change within the district, led by the superintendent's implementation of the policy. It has always been my belief and experience that this form of governance, governing from the 30,000-foot level, as Dr. Bankus has said, leads to the best results. The result for District 11 shows for very innovative investments in the staff and the students. Perhaps the most important change that I have seen in this board is the return to parents' rights. In the past, it seemed to me that the district turned away from parents' rights and replaced them with the policies that gave the administration the authority to override or ignore parents. I am so grateful that common sense has returned, and parents are once again responsible for their students and have an important role to play in the education of their students. In my opinion, this is a giant positive step forward towards engaging community and families in public education. I've been around the district long enough, and believe me, it's been a long time, to see the inclusion, then exclusion, now inclusion of academic choice for the District 11 community. I'm a firm believer in offering as many educational pathways as possible. The choice of programs now offered or considered in District 11 far exceed anything that I was ever aware of in the past. I believe that choice is an opportunity to succeed, not a hindrance to educational success. For these reasons, as well as many others, I would consider it the highest honor to be a director on this Board of Education, even though it is only for a short period of time. I believe we can continue to move forward in the new D11 environment. As an old Army saying goes, keep leaning forward in the foxhole and never lean back.
I'll go this way around, this time around. Dr. Bankus with the first
You've
question.
kind of addressed this, but let me ask it again. Why are you interested in serving this short-term position on the board and your motivation for being part of this governance team?
I think that this board is a revolutionary school board. I think whether you realize it or not, you lead Colorado in many different things that you've already done that now is becoming the thing to do. And I think that my experience, both as within the district, as a faculty member at the University of Phoenix, as a classroom, with classroom experience in substitute teaching and the math tutor at Doherty for a couple of years, gives me a real depth of experience that I think can help, even in a short period of time, move us forward, which is what I want to see. I always have for 20-some years.
Dr. Carey.
What is your understanding of the role of a board director?
Well, I believe that the the role of the board director is to hire a superintendent. That's one of the roles that they have to do. But more importantly, is to establish the policy with direction so that the superintendent or whoever has the guidance that they need in order to run the district in accordance with the policies that the school board creates.
Right, Rob?
In your opinion, what is the primary challenge facing District 11 and how would you address it?
I think the communication within District 11 to the parents and everything is spot on. And I think you spend a lot of time doing that. But I think the real problem is how is the district communicating with the rest of us, the taxpayers, the grandparents that don't have kids in school? How are you communicating the fact that District 11 is on a major role change that's happening within Colorado Springs? That, to me, is probably one of the biggest problems, because older folks like myself that aren't involved, I'm involved in the district, so I'm not a great example, but older folks are, because I am one. They're not paying attention. They don't watch Wednesday night TV and stuff like that. So I think part of what has to happen next is we have to figure a way to change the culture, not in the district, because that's changing, but outside the district. The people that want to buy a house in District 11, not in District 20 or 49 or somewhere else.
Dr. Jurgens? Question 4.
Yep. When making decisions for the district, what principles and priorities would guide your thinking?
As you know, you read my resume, I was the governor of the Rotary District here in southern Colorado. And Rotary has 4 things that that guides our decision-making. First one, and this is mine, is it the truth? So if someone says they're being bullied, well, is that really true or not, right? So, or is it fair to all concerned? Well, that has to be a discussion piece, but is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And that's what we're in the business for, to try to do that so that our kids end up in excellent schools with excellent teachers, doing very well as future leaders of our community and country. And then finally is, will it be, did I say that, will it be beneficial to all? I didn't. That means that when we make decisions as a school board, I see that as we're trying to make it as beneficial to all, as a reason, as a way to get together and form a unified position. Those are the 4 things that would help guide my thinking.
Dr. Hafley?
Just a second. Hi. Could you tell us about a time you worked with people who had different priorities or perspectives than your own and how you handled that situation?
Most of my life. Most of my life is spent after retiring from the military, which, as many of you may know, we don't always agree, but we seem to be moving forward after 250 years. So, but I would say that my experience as both the president of the Kissing Camel Sertoma Club, as well as the Pikes Peak chapter of the American Society for Training and Development, and all these leadership positions outside of District 11, have taught me very much. It taught me a lot about how you negotiate leadership to arrive at a decision and a consensus. Not let alone working with Lyman Kaiser. Yeah, this is so.
Okay, we are pretty much at the end of our interview process, so this is a time for you to make a closing statement. So it's the elevator speech. If you were asking the community to vote for you, what would you say to the community to convince them to choose you? And as you go through this closing statement, is there anything else that you have not shared with the board that you would like the board to consider while making its decision?
I think, well, I have run for the school board in School District 11. I did way back in the 80s. I didn't get very far. It was a different environment, a different community. And then again, right around 2000. And unfortunately, when, 2001, when 9/11 hit, I lost a good friend of mine. It was a 3-star general and another young Department of the Army civilian. And from those experiences, I would say to them that what you see is what you get. And I think that by framing any kind of a speech that I might have around those 4 principles that I talked about, truthfulness and so on, I think that's what I would use if I were ever to run for the school board again. And that would mean I'd still have to be vertical. And I just think that this is one of the most important jobs. I have always thought that a volunteer can actually take on. I mean, this is really tough work, and I commend you all for getting to where we are today, and to Director Ott for helping us with the mill levy stuff, and former Director Nelson. So I'm here. Like I said, what you see is what you get, and I hope that, and I believe that I can keep this district along with the school board moving forward.
Could you go back and repeat the 4?
Oh, is it the,
Is it truth? Is it fair
Fair.
to all concerned?
yeah, will it build goodwill and better friendships?
Oh, okay. I missed that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then will it be beneficial to all?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. X. Again, appreciate your time.
Not a problem.
You are more than welcome to sit in the audience if you choose to, or you can.
The last time I did that, I got in real trouble when I got home. So I don't think I will, but thank you anyway.
We don't want you to get into trouble, so.
No, you don't, really.
Ms. Madden, next.
Nicholas Bradner.
Welcome, Ms. Madden. Thank you for completing the application, your willingness to step in and serve in this capacity if appointed to this position. Just going through some basics as to how this is going to run today. You will have an opportunity to introduce yourself at the very beginning and also have a closing statement at the very end. In between that opening statement and closing statement, the board has identified 5 questions that they're going to ask you. And as you can see on the monitor, you have a total of 18 minutes for those 7 questions, the opening statement, closing statements, and the 5 questions. You can monitor the clock and figure out how you want to allocate that 18 minutes to answer those questions. If you take a longer time to answer one question, you will have a shorter time at the end. There will be a hard stop at 18 minutes. Are there any questions for me at this time? Okay. Ms. Olson, we can start the process and the clock. I'll start with the first question. Please introduce yourself to the board and also to the community, who you are, what your background is, what experience and skill set that you possess that you bring to this process and to serve as a board member, highlighting specifically any relevant connections you have with District 11.
Well, my name is Maureen Madden, and I am currently a rural carrier with the U.S. Postal Service. I've been there 13 years. I've lived in Colorado Springs for 16 years, and over half of that has been in the D11 district. So I have come to know several people that actually do work with the district. I volunteered several times for the district, and I've actually worked part-time with some of the schools.
I'll go this way around back to you, Director Hafley, with the first question.
Hi.
Hi.
Why are you interested in serving in this short-term position on the board, and what's your motivation for being part of this governance team?
Well, I see it as a great opportunity to contribute to the D11 community, to come alongside the board members, to continue improving and enhancing the educational needs for the students.
Director Jurgensen.
Sorry, I can't write that fast. And what is your understanding of the role as a board director?
My understanding of the role is to come alongside with the other board members, setting school policies, going over school budgets, working with the superintendent, also working with teachers, parents, and the community to make sure that they know that the school district is doing the best to enhance their students' educational needs.
Dr. Rock.
In your opinion, what is the primary challenge facing District 11 and how would you address it?
Ooh. I think the primary challenge actually is for all schools. I think students are leaving schools unable to read, write, or do math at their grade levels. So I think it's unfortunate for the students that walk out of the classrooms, but it's also, to me, it's a bad rep of the school districts because they are letting these students walk out. If I had to say in that, my option would to probably start an early intervention program in the schools so that we see the need early on instead of later as they're walking out the door.
Thank you.
Dr. Kim.
When making decisions for the district, what principles and priorities would guide your thinking?
Most definitely the students, their well-being, their needs, to make sure that the policies that are in place are there to enhance their educational needs, not to just be there. Also, that the finances are there to enhance their needs in the educational process.
Dr. Mackes.
Tell us about a time you worked with people who had different priorities or perspectives than your own, and how you handled that situation.
So that's in almost every workplace, any place I've ever worked. Honestly, I think that would probably, one that comes to me is, I worked with a nonprofit, and my job was to make sure that all our clients were receiving equally the benefits that we provided to them. I did work with several people who wanted to offer more to other clients than certain clients, and I felt the need that we can't do that. We can't offer one need to one person and not bring it to everybody. So there were several times that we had knockout, drag-out discussions, but we came to a mutual agreement.
Thank you. So we are pretty much at the end of our interview process, so this is your opportunity to make a closing statement, what sometimes we call an elevator speech. If you were asking the community to vote for you, what would you say to the community to convince them to choose you? And as you go through this closing statement, is there anything else that you would like to share with the board that you haven't shared yet, so the board can consider that while making its decision?
Well, I would consider you voting for me because I'm willing to come alongside the board to help contribute and move forward on the positive process that's been going on. I'm not a politician, I'm not here to make waves, to make myself, put up a flag for myself. I'm here as a community member to reach out to help in the district that I live in, to do positive things for the schools in this area. I am very, very strongly committed to listening to people so that they know that their voice is being heard. So listening to employees, listening to community members, it's something that I do that helps them to ensure them that they know their voice is being heard when we go into our meetings or our board meeting on decision making.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Madden. Again, appreciate you putting yourself out there and willing to serve in this capacity. We are at the end of the process. You are welcome to sit in the audience if you want to, whatever your choice. Okay, thank you, and we will let you know at a later point. The fourth candidate we have is Lisa.
Salatko.
Yeah. Want to make sure I pronounce her last name right. It's Salatko.
Salatko.
Yeah.
And spell it right, right?
Well, we may be done with it a lot sooner than we anticipated. I thought,
earlier.
we may be doing the interview process till 5:30. We may be done by 4:45, the way it looks like.
Maybe not 4:45. 5.
It's interesting that nobody wants to sit and listen to anybody else.
Yeah.
Would you?
No.
Like the interview setting? I definitely wouldn't. I'd want to just leave.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, Ms. Salatko.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. I'll use some of my
Oh,
time. Thank you so
okay.
very much, Director. Thank you very much.
Hello.
Super.
Hi, thank you.
Nice meeting you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you again. Thank you for your willingness to complete the application and go through this process and serve in this capacity if appointed to this position. So going through the process for this evening, you will have an opportunity to make an opening statement, introduce yourself, and at the end, make a closing statement as well. In between that opening statement and closing statement, the board has identified 5 questions to ask you. And as you can see on the monitor, you have a total of 18 minutes for this interview process. So it's up to you to monitor yourself. If you take a little bit longer time to answer one question in the beginning, you may have a little lesser time in the end.
Okay.
Okay, so there will be a hard stop when we reach 18 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, any questions for me at this
No,
time?
sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, start the process on the clock, Ms. Olson. I'll start with the first question. As I said, it's opening statement. Introduce yourself to the board and the community, who you are, your background, and what experience or skill set that you bring to the table that will help you serve as a board member, highlighting specifically any relevant experience you have in district level.
Okay. So, good afternoon. My name is Lisa Salatko. And I have almost 15 years of connection with District 11. First in 2011 as an elected council member that represented downtown, which is the heart of the city, and Palmer High School is part of that, as well as additional the 11 schools. Then in 2018, I worked with District 11's procurement services. I was sought out for my professionalism as a land broker. And District 11 was considering on selling some of their vacant ground, so I had brought forward a contract, and I worked with Ms. Odom, I believe was her name, Christine at the time. And then in 2019, I became a homeowner here in District 11. And I have also been a substitute teacher, and I have a professional license in school counseling. So that's my connection with District 11. And then my background is I have a master's of school counseling, master's of science in school counseling. My bachelor's was in clinical counseling psychology, and I was halfway through an MBA when I was elected to city council. I have a long-standing, probably almost 25 years of service-related experience. I've been a known member in the community of being an advocate, especially for families and particularly women and children. And I have a definite interest as a homeowner and a single parent in having a strong school district in our community. I think it makes a great community. Personally, I'm a single mother to 4 daughters, 3 of them that are in the Colorado school systems. And I know this school district, and so one of the reasons that I wanted to run is because I believe that this board and Superintendent Gull has made great momentum in improving the excellence, if that's the desire for the school district. And I know that as a parent and a homeowner, that that's what we're looking for. And so from observing what this board has done, I believe that even though it's a 4-month vacancy, you need somebody to come in here and support the initiatives that you've made. You need somebody to come in here. And my background, I've dealt with stakeholders, I've dealt with the press, I've dealt with tons of community members. I'm comfortable, I'm known for my professionalism, I'm known for being prepared. And so I think it would be a great opportunity for me to come in and support the continuity that the board and Superintendent Gull has going right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Backus.
You kind of addressed this, but let me ask it again. Why are you interested in serving in this short-term position on the board, and your motivation for being part of this governance team?
Well, again, I'll just reiterate that I think when this board has set goals and have been able to accomplish that, one with the hiring of the current superintendent and sitting here and saying, we're going to mix things up. We are going to focus on student learning. We're going to support our staff. We're going to be looking at different policies that we believe will improve the school districts. And so that is something that I think cannot be taken lightly. Again, a lot of people may sit here and think that it's only 4 months, but you don't want to lose the cohesiveness that this group has developed in that amount of time. And I personally, I have no other motivating. I'm not running for anything. One of the things that I think is actually really important is I've heard several of you talk about in past meetings that nobody really understands the role of a senior governance board. I definitely do, and I don't think people really get the time commitment. So you need somebody that, I myself am retired. I only serve on one other board in the community, which is a social board. I have 3 children that are away now, and so I have the time and commitment. And again, I'm known for my preparedness, so I think that it would be a perfect timing to have somebody that could come in here. And again, you don't have to worry about having them catch up to speed, because again, you expect preparedness, which I'm always prepared. And then you have somebody again too that can go along with the initiatives that the board has been setting its goals for. Being a substitute school teacher, I've been in the schools. In fact, I just did at Bristol yesterday elementary. It's a hard time. It's a hard time for students, it's a hard time for parents, it's a hard time for educators. And District 11 is on that right strong path for excellence, and I would like to be part of that.
Thank you. Director Kay.
What is your understanding of the role of board director?
Well, the governing board is just that. It establishes the policies and is in charge of all the different schools within the district. So again, is when my previous experience on city council, I've done large budgets from, I've done on several boards, $1 million budget up to a $3 billion budget with the utility boards. I understand that you look at different policies. within the school district, and then now you're setting different objectives, you're dealing with structural issues and things like that. So I have a pretty good understanding of what the board expectations are.
Dr. Ryan?
In your opinion, what is the primary challenge facing District 11 and how would you improve it?
Well, I would say,
Address it.
okay, well, I would say in the beginning is of probably taking, when you have new people come in and new attitudes and new expectations, and you're dealing with one of the largest districts within the city and the expectations that people have had, there's been a whole philosophy change in D11. We're going from having 18 schools that were almost considered subpar to 3. You have measurable improvements over the last several years. And so I would assume that one of reputation, so to go from of knowing that the reputation of a district that maybe had some challenges, maybe didn't appreciate their staff as before, to all of a sudden taking a new role of saying, oh no, we're taking our students first, then we're taking our educators second, we're gonna make sure that they're prepared, we're gonna make sure that they know that we're all, and then hiring the right type of staff to have that same type of vision and going forward and saying, okay, this is what we have set up as a goal, and we're only gonna hire and bring in people that can help us meet that, and that includes teachers now. So I've been following along about what the expectations, hiring, how the individual schools are going, things like that.
Thank you.
Dr. Jorgensen?
Yeah, when making decisions for the district, what principles and priorities would guide your thinking?
Well, I would say students first, again, is making sure that education, as a parent, one of the things that I was always concerned about was my child getting the best education? Do they have the best educators? I know that we've had a real big problem in all of the school districts about children being below grade level. And if I had the opportunity, one of the reasons why I started substituting again is, and Superintendent Gull, you might appreciate this, I went to Citadel Mall and made a purchase of a purse, and the young lady was about 18 and she did not apply the 35% off. And so I brought it to her attention and she started becoming flustered and she could not figure out what 35% is off of $300. And so I had to go through the steps. And so when we look at numbers of like students being like 30% of reading level or math level and things like that, that made me want to get back into the schools since I have the skills. And again too is watching this board with some of the policies that you've brought forward in the last 2 years. Those are policies that I would have voted for myself. There are policies I've discussed in the community and so I'm excited to see that progression, and I'm excited to see staff committed to saying, hey, we're changing things up and we're going forward. You can either come with us or we're gonna leave you behind.
Thank you. Director Haefele?
Hi. If you could tell us about a time you worked with people who had different priorities or perspectives than your own, and then how you handled that situation.
Trying to think of specifically, because I've worked with so many neighborhood groups. So my background came as being a neighborhood advocate, and so one of the I'll talk about too. So I was a previous CASA GAL, if the board's familiar with what that role is. And again too, it was then taking that role and dealing with the judicial system and advocating for the child and having to talk to them about what their expectations were and what my role is as that CASA GAL and as a parent. So it was a little bit different of having to follow kind of a subset of what their expectations were, and then me as that mother and role to kind of interject some differences. But I've had several positions where I've found myself having to explain and justify, but I'm a known facilitator, so I've always learned to go around, deal with that.
My wife had a CASA GAL through her adoption process. Maybe just briefly explain what that is for everybody.
Yeah, so it's a court-appointed special advocate and a guardian ad litem, and I first was one in Illinois, and I actually had one of the most difficult child abuse cases that was in the state. And so what we do is we advocate for the children within the judicial system, depending if they're in a family domestic case or abuse case, and our advocation is for the child. So basically what you guys are doing for your students.
Just outside school walls, so.
Thank you. So this is your time to make a closing statement. So what we call as an elevator speech. If you were asking the community to vote for you, what would you say to convince them to choose you? Okay. And is there anything else that you would like the board to consider in when making this decision?
Well, again, respectfully, I would just ask that when you're looking at all of the candidates to understand what the motivation is for wanting to join the board, and if they share the board's initiatives and will continue out the policy that the D11 board has set in motion. I also would sit here and say that I think I am in an advantage of not only being a current substitute teacher within District 11 and also another district. So I understand the difference of Bloom's taxonomy and Maslow's hierarchy, which a lot of people don't. And so again, it's a really important role. This is a very important governing role. And again, too, is my only reason for stepping forward would be I want to keep that excellence. With being a homeowner here, I want the best school district in the city. I want people to be aware of that, we're offering pre-K when no other districts are, that we're looking at our different buildings, our different schools, that we have improved hiring and expectations in those departments. So again, too, is I would just like to offer that it would, hopefully offer some confidence that you would have someone coming in, that one is educated, one has a true passion and longstanding history for almost 30 years of advocating for children and families, and that my only role is to collaborate and keep on the continuity so that we can keep that excellence going.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so very much, Alex.
Yep.
$105 on that purse? That's a good
Pardon
deal.
me?
You saved $105 on that purse?
No, that was a different one.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that completes the interview process. So the board had an opportunity to listen to all 4 candidates. We know the process at this time, so you will pretty soon get that informal straw poll survey. If you want to think over this overnight, just complete that brief survey by tomorrow noon. And then I will keep you informed as to what the next steps in the process are. Okay?
So I'd like to acknowledge Ms. Olson and Chief Hopmer, as well as the board members. This is a nice process. You guys, I think, were nice and tight. I think this is fair and equitable, but I just appreciate the work that's happened behind the scene. Ms. Olson briefed Executive Cabinet today on this process because obviously we are all employees of the board. And understanding what is happening here is important, not just for the dynamic of the board, but for those who carry the work forward every day. So just a chance to say thank you to all those that had a part in this process as you all mull that vacancy opportunity.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the people that helped us put this process together, come up with the questions, and also legal counsel who helped me through this process, developing this process. So with that, we will take probably a 5-minute break and then start again with the rest of the work session. We have 2 agenda items and we'll start with it at 5 o'clock. the board, a couple of weeks back, requested discipline data and probably an update on the behavior policy and the cell phone policy. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Gall to set up this conversation.
Good evening, good afternoon, board. I guess 5 o'clock is almost into evening now, right? So, good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I have at the table with me our Chief of Strategy, Nicole Ottmer. I also have Carol Fry standing in for Deirdre. Deirdre is normally the person who leads this work, of which Dr. Schulte is going to help share with you the data and the plans that we have going forward. But Deirdre's out delivering an adult child to college, and so I appreciate Dr. Fry standing in that space as well. Let me start first and foremost with thank you to the board for being very clear on the ABCs last year. Last year, we made a great swing. I heard some of the candidates talk about, we set a standard that said we have a higher expectation for our learning environment for children, first and foremost with cell phones. That has now being debated as a statewide standard. I get, if you watch social media, there's a gentleman actually, I believe in Alabama, an educator that actually is going viral right now that said it was as simple as taking away the cell phones. Children are now in trouble for talking during class or sharing a note during class. But his comment really was, in just a short order of time, everybody is actively taking notes in class again, which is our goal, is that as we put our professional educators in the space to share the learning opportunity, that students are equally engaged in that space. Of the work that we have to share with you today, I will say that the win has been cell phones is sticking. You'll see that in the numbers, we have lots of cell phone incidents. That's good because we're reporting that, but what we no longer have is a retreat from this idea that we cannot tell children that electronic devices are not appropriate in the learning environments. Yes, we are tracking that. You will see that data on there. Well, I will add caution, and I will task myself and my team, because we're working very hard on it, is there is still great inconsistency even in the small size of this school district. Late last year, I walked through a unnamed high school, and there was a sign that said, basically you earned the right for your cell phones for today. And I had to tear that down, and I had to take that into an administrator's office that said, I don't think you understand, this is not a policy that we are wavering on, and it's not something that you're bartering with students. There are thousands of other ways to talk and convince and cajole students into thank you for the work that you bring, but access to your cell phone is not one of them. We have extended resources towards this, the Yonder pouches. Our processes have gotten tighter this year. We started smoother this year than we did last year on that piece. But when you see the behavior data here, we really had to cull our data, because the original, as it is actually taken, says in some schools, of which none of the student population has changed, there is a 300% increase in incidences, of which it is not a 300% increase in incidences. We are just now actually tracking incidences where some of the anecdotal fears of Dr. Bankus gets sent to the office and come back to it with a lollipop. Those are things that we heard. That's now tracked at that school. But the behavior wasn't 300 times worse at that school than there was before. So the data you are going to see right here is kind of redacted to be representative of the schools that we believe didn't have major shifts in administration that now say this belongs in that column instead of that column. And yet you'll see in between cell phone and then all these other trackable items is the ubiquitous other. We can't report others. We have to now start getting to the place where if the largest category is other, that's not giving you a feel good that we're actually doing the things you've asked us to do, and it's not giving us actionable data. Because David's other in one school might be different than Nicole's other in another. That's a lot of others. That's like a triple negative or a triple other. So to that, I will kick over to the team. I want to hold the questions for the end. Let us get through this. And then let's see where we are meeting the board's desire as we continue to drive for more consistency, more clarity, and more transparency in what is or what isn't happening. And then I'll save my final comment for the end on my promise to the board. Dr. Schulte?
Okay, well,
first of all, I would just like to say good evening. It's nice to see all of you. I saw some of you at the back to school events already. I haven't met you formally yet, but it's nice to be here with you this evening. And also just wonderful to be able to share this information with all of you tonight. So thank you for having me here tonight. So you can see on this slide, it outlines our accountability structure. So beginning last year, the district took a more focused approach on the ABCs, so our attendance, behavior, and cell phone policy. And within our behavior reporting, we focused on a clear accountability structure that held all students accountable for their actions and ensured a safety of staff and students with a learning environment. Because I want you to hear loud and clear that safety is the utmost importance for all of our schools. And so you'll see here, and I don't know if you've seen this before, but these are behavior expectations because again, like I said, we want to clearly outline what the expectations are. And so again, in 2024-25, we trained all principals in the requirement to document every incident that is state reportable through PowerSchool. This replaced inconsistent reporting systems across our district. And this training also emphasized parent communication regarding discipline because we firmly believe that having that family-school partnership and all of us working together, we will see a difference in these data moving forward. And so these are just specific areas that we are mandatory, we make referrals for mandatory law enforcement. So we include law enforcement for each of these areas. They're automatically referred to law enforcement. Dr. Colicky, I'll turn this over to you.
I'll speak to a couple slides quickly here. It really goes back to what Superintendent Gall was speaking about, and we have had a noisy system for several years before this point, in inconsistent reporting and incomplete reporting, or reporting happening in a very localized fashion, meaning literally there's a spreadsheet or a piece of paper on a principal's desk, and they're kind of keeping some tally marks. Obviously, those are not actionable. That's not an actionable approach, and that's not a systemic approach to get to where you want us to be. So we have really dialed in, and with the work of Dr. Schulte's team and Chief Shear, we're in a really good place to tighten up that reporting, start to condense some of the many categories. So there's way too many others in the data set, really categorizing better, and then all incidents reaching the principal are now being consistently documented, ensuring this complete review. Just out speaking with several principals, we are still working towards the consistent part. There is still some inconsistency in the amount of reporting, but the clear expectation, now we systematize that expectation. So what you'll see then is by better reporting, by tighter categorization, better business rules, we see these this is a very high variability year. So hence the 300% at some sites, and then down 2% at other sites. Right? These are not reflections of reality necessarily, but a high variability due to new reporting and new business rules. What you can expect to see is that as we move into this year, we're level setting, and we would expect that variation to become more moderate, while we're still having some isolated cases where a principal might be hesitant to report a conversation they have with a student. That will be tightened up. So we'll have fewer missed incidents, variability shrinks, and then increased confidence as we grow into the third year where we sustain our practice, and that becomes low variability. So these are the metrics that my office will be using to measure the systemic approach that we're taking and the effectiveness of that approach, where if we're still seeing high variability into this year, we have business rules to attend to and reporting factors to attend to. So this is kind of what you would expect to see over 3 years of normalizing our data into a consistent approach that is actionable, that then we will layer on top of other outcomes. 5E would be a great spot to start, on top of any academic outcome and on top of any data set that's indicative of adult behavior. So it's exciting to be in this space, but it comes with this high variability factor.
Thanks. So now I'd like to go over the total behavior incidents, and then I will also break it down by other. I'll do elementary first, then middle, then high school. So you can see on this graph, the total incidents compared from 23-24 to 24-25. There has been a rise in reported behavior. So overall, our increase in incidents is due to a significant rise in violations coded as other. And the next slide will break that down. So you can see at the elementary level, the two primary areas within the other category are unsafe behavior and other violations. And so what we
Other
would
within
love
other?
to, say again?
Other within other, again.
Other within other, right? And so we're really wanting to work with our school staff this year and say, how can we move all of those incidents from the other into a more succinct area that will help us to take further action? We just need more specificity in our data.
And the good news is cell phones are not an issue at the elementary school.
Exactly, luckily. And now moving into middle school. So you can see an increase in behavior incidents at this level as well, with almost doubling in size. So this was our first year, as you all know, enforcing the cell phone policy. And I would like to applaud all of you for implementing that policy, because I think moving forward, we are going to see more and more improvement, more engagement, students more engaged not only with peers, but with us as the adults as well. So here's the middle school other. And you can see the cell phones, that was the highest level in the other category.
I'm sorry, I need to interrupt. Can we just define incidents? Is that not necessarily a referral, right? You're not getting somebody a referral for being tardy in middle school, but they are logging these things, these incidents in Power School.
Exactly
And it's
right.
just like, hey, David was absent again today, or tardy again today, and that's an incident on here.
In Power School,
Okay.
yes. And so total high school behavior incidents, again, another increase, and primarily due to cell phones, as you can see here. And again, that is the highest level in the other category. Yes,
Can I ask a data question?
Yeah, sure.
Cell phones, was this even a category in 23-24?
it was not.
And it should be noted too that majority of those violations happened early on, and over the course of the year, within the school year, you saw a decreased level of incidents. But as that policy came into effect, it took longer to make sure that we were having that happen without pushback.
So can I just make a very quick data point here? Can you go back one slide?
Absolutely.
So from 20,
The different end size, right?
so from 23 to 24, right, if you take a look at the actual delta between those two,
Mhm.
and then you look at the cell phone category, the cell phone category actually explains even more of the gap between those two, which implies that other incidents must have
Gone down.
decreased.
Yes.
I could grab a calculator and, we could work out the numbers real quick, but I just would like to make that point. That if cell phones were not being tracked in 23-24, and why would they be, there was no policy, then this gap is entirely, and more so, explained by cell phone incidents.
It's, if you go forward a slide, it still doesn't excuse the fact that particularly as we advance our relationships on connected intelligence with Power School, the fact that other outside of cell phones is still either the highest or the second highest category at each of the different school type levels. We at least need to be scanning and searching for keywords in what was typed into that incident. So if I were just to make a difference between my hair and Parth's hair, you would be able to find in that incident the word hair twice. So we would be able to at least at this macro level say, there's a hair issue at table number 9. We're at table number 9. Anybody get that joke? Table number 9? Wedding singer. Sorry, we have an ongoing thing about. That's right. But that's an area that we have to train ourselves and our business rules to be better at, because we can't have, it would be fine if the other category was the 1 or the 2, because yes, every data point is important, but what you see here is there are still trends. You're seeing that classroom tardiness is still an issue that we, as it is connected, the fact that the A's for attendance and the C's for cell phone are both showing up in the reporting says we're still not there yet. Now, how many data points are in the possible number of tardies at high school? Well, maybe 550 is actually statistically insignificant, but I can promise you that that is not quite standardized across either building and certainly not classroom. Some teacher has said, not taking it, that Jurgensen's late anymore, and Jurgensen gets sent down because they're outside of that window and it's disruptive to the classroom environment. So there is still much consistency and standardization to happen, but I appreciate the call out on the cell phones. There's more slides that will show you the isolated nature of some of these as well. Go back.
And so this is just explaining the overall increase, and this gives you just another visual representation, and again showing that cell phones are the primary concern for the increase in incidents. And Director Jorgensen, to your point, you can also see that classroom tardiness is also a concern, as well as other violation, which we need to tease that apart, and then unsafe behavior as well.
Can anyone comment before we go on just on how those categories are kind of driven by state reporting? You know, so we don't look like we just refuse to make new categories. Like, what's the genesis of why these are categories?
The other category?
No, just any of the categories that we report.
So they're all state reportable, and so we work directly with staff to clearly define what we think should go into the system, so that we are accurately reflecting what is happening in our schools.
If I may add, we have gone overboard with the number of categories and on-the-fly categories that we've been using. So beyond state report, so these would be an example of state reportable, and then we've created additional categories to capture different situations. So we are working, we are almost done with that work, to have a system that prevents that in the future. So we meet the state reportable category, we retain the flexibility to have other, but we're not going to have hundreds of possible categories being used.
So all of the ones that are listed here are state reportable, is that correct?
That's correct.
I don't think we need to belabor the points about cell phones too much more, but I will just name, as Dr. Schulte said, the ABC Focus kicked off principal training in the 24-25 school year, and it did again this year in the 25-26 school year to refine and hone the processes, continue to standardize what is happening in schools related to those 3 pieces. Specifically the distribution of Yonder pouches back to school. We know we had incoming 6th graders that had to get used to Yonder pouches and incoming 9th graders too in their new environment. Those were distributed at those sites, most of them before the first day of school when students came to check out their laptop. We had honed those procedures. Here's your pouch, here's the tag to it so that you know it's yours, and how to use those. At schools like Palmer, we had to reset where some of the unlocking devices were given the changes to the campus. So we set up all of those kind of procedures with principals on August 1st before students were back in building to make sure that we're getting consistent implementation of that moving forward. We know in 6 through 12 in our system they use Yonder pouches, and in the elementary schools the devices are away in backpacks. You also are aware that in Colorado House Bill 251135, it's called Communication Devices in Schools, passed in the legislature this past session. It goes into effect July 1st, 2026, with guidance coming out from the Colorado Department of Education to districts in December. We're well ahead of that because we've already instituted this policy thanks to the board in years prior to when the state's putting in that piece for all schools across the system.
And I would like to say, I was at Swigert the first day of school, and students were saying, where are the Yonder pouches? I need to put my cell phone in the Yonder pouches. So the routine is sticking. They know what they need to do, and they're following through with it.
I'll share the opposite side of that, as I saw a middle schooler walking in and figured out how to have their cell phone in the Yonder pouch, but have their fingers act as the magnetic shield such that the clip couldn't clip and keep it closed, and walk down until an administrator said, get your hand out of the pouch, and so that it closed. So, and I will say that the largest challenge that we have with cell phones is how do we incorporate because we lock them down on campus. But all of our high schools are run open campuses. And so is it at lunchtime that you can open your phone because you're going out for lunch? But what if you're out on a free period, or what if you transition the school to go, some of our children will attend organizations that are outside of the high schools. And it's easy to see that if you pull up outside of one of our schools in the northeast side of town that has benches right out front, that all you see are kids just sitting there going like that. Like, we can modify some of the things. Our goal is to have kids engaged in school. Our goal is not to say this is the line, or the line of where you can and cannot have a phone. So if you're involved in school, we're happy to then stretch that says, look, if you're waiting for your mom or your dad, you can have your cell phone out because now you're getting that communication. But if you're on a free period, or you're just waiting for lunch to end, how about we get that thing wrapped up and get back into school? Because the children are especially the children that have been resistant to this, are still suffering from the anxious generation addiction to the FOMO and what's happening somewhere else. And the kids that we have seen that have been more obedient to this have actually thanked us. I was in a meeting at a different high school that will remain unnamed, west of I-25. You see the way I'm doing this. And the kids wanted a meeting with the superintendent last year about cell phones. We want the right, this is not fair, this is not that, but actually I'm more engaged in the class, and I'm having better relationships, and I know that there's less cyberbullying happening on, but how dare you take away my cell phone? So that information, again, is we want to be reflective of how our students are feeling about this, but we're setting an expectation that says learning can and should be better if your focus is on the quality of the instruction that we're offering.
Yeah, so this graph is the percent of student population by grade level. And you can see that the blue line, these are students with at least one incident. And then the yellow line, students with 3 or more incidents. So you can see over time that those students are learning their lessons, right? There are far fewer students that have 3 or more incidents that have 1 incident.
Just interesting how it takes a bell-shaped curve, and most of the problems are in 7th and 8th grade.
Right.
And then it decreases.
Yeah, but also that's very consistent with the challenge that we brought forward last year of the inconsistency in what our expectations are at middle school, and our inability to intervene earlier. I also heard that in candidate conversations today, which is we have more than enough data to tell you exactly what's going to happen for literally every child in the system. And yet still, even as a governing board and then as an administration, we're still a little slow to act on what we know to be true. There's a lot of hope as a strategy, and let's just, well, kumbaya, we'll give it another try. These data points, these are the types of data points that large organizations use for metadata analysis that tells you what are the trends, not a District 11 trend, a trend in our country. And that's how, people don't really want you to click and buy something on social media. They want access to your data on what did you click and buy, because that's the piece that they're actually selling. We have the data, and it's tipping our hand, and it'll probably take another 2 or 3 years to come to reality. But the idea of having an enterprise relationship with a data company that will be looking at our data and how it connects to outcomes for students will put us in front of how hard it seems for us to be to say, it's time for this student to consider a different school in order to ensure we get them back on track. We wait too long to make the decision points and make the recommendation for families. We're still confused when we get that brief to you all on what's the purpose of summer school. It was a very clear purpose a different generation ago. You failed to meet a learning objective, and now here you have a chance to make it up. That's all there was. And now there's no teeth to that. Now it's a daycare center. So this, I think, is important. That one, we do still have a middle school problem. You can see exactly that we hold on to kids till 5th grade. That same child, and if we were to show this by cohort experience, it's not that that's the COVID kid that went from 5th grade to 6th grade. That's not the year that kid entered the school. It's not a COVID bubble. It is a transition from an environment in elementary school where there are very clear expectations, and then into a middle school where now suddenly there might be expectations, but there hasn't been a match of both expectation and accountability.
You've identified the concern. Let's get after it.
I thought earlier you were saying that that was also a factor was variability of enforcement across schools. No?
Say that again?
I thought when you started your comment.
Yeah, my first comment is overall, we still have great variability in how things are implemented in schools. This is telling you that even with that great variability, your problem is middle schools. My problem is middle schools. That's where kids become most expressive of pushing back against as an expectation or not, and how that is handled. The good news in that is more often than not, my HR term for the week, more likely than not, the student does that once and then is course corrected. The yellow line is your repeat offenders. And that's much, much lower than is the blue line of, now I'm in 6th grade, so I guess I'm supposed to act differently. I appreciate Dr. Schulte's comments about Swigert. Jumpstart Day at Swigert, which was on Tuesday, and all I saw was delightful children who couldn't wait to come learn at Swigert. And I said to Principal Cockrell, Dr. Cockrell, I said, like, how is it that we can just make Swigert sweet again? Why don't you make every 8th grader go down and witness these 6th graders who came in and waited patiently in the cafeteria to be introduced to their classes and understand what the rules are? This is, God bless every middle school administrator and teacher. This is where children are going through adolescence, which means, we are, with our middle school accountability work, leaning in very heavy into this space, but that's where the messiness is.
And so this graph shows our total expulsions were primarily a result of assault and violence. And of the expulsions that were issued in the lower grades, we are more likely to defer the expulsions. And then in high schools, they are serving their expulsions.
Can you go back one more on the expulsions? We shared this in a Mars report, and I just want to make sure, because all the community doesn't get the Mars report. There are 3 non-negotiables when expulsions come to my desk, because first of all, I think they are so egregious that they require immediacy and real consistency in how we react to them. And secondly, because although I know that many of those behaviors are a manifestation of another challenge that is presented in that child's life, we lose more families when we don't act on these items. And so if you can't pay attention to what they are, first and foremost, we are drug-free campuses, period, dot. I know that our state has this ongoing, that our state is supportive of recreational use of marijuana. The law says at 21 years of age. The law is the same thing about alcohol. We treat that very sternly, and we need parents to understand that. If parents are accepting of alcohol or drug use in their house, we are not at our schools. It is not fair to our educators to have children who are not bringing the full, not yet fully developed cognition of their brains into that space. Children are not better prepared by coming to school drunk or high. Period, dot. Every study in America, even the ones sponsored by Colorado, have said that regular use of marijuana and or alcohol in not fully developed brains is more detrimental than it is whatever that our social belief is that it can be relaxing or easing of some other stresses. The second one is weapons. This started 4 years ago when I got here. We had a consistency rolling threat of we're going to shoot this school up and we're going to paste the social media thing of a weapon on it or make a threat on a teacher or another staff member, we expel those students. This is the state where it all started. The fact that we still don't have laws that actually go even further on what is allowed and not allowed on a threat at school is, again, crazy to me when I think about what happened in Columbine a generation ago. And the third, when I say assault and violence, that means the police have shown up and they're writing a report that is going to press charges. That is not how a school handles the normal who bowed up on who in the hallway and somebody said something. And we do a very good job with our security staff and our SRO relationship to de-escalate those. Those blue ones on that are somebody's gotten stitches, the cops are showing up, this is going to court. Because again, even though there might be something that generated that could have been handled beforehand, it can't continue. Because kids go home and tell their parents that, and the parents say, my kid's not going to school there. My kid's just not going to school there. To Dr. Schulte's comment on the middle schools, we opened up Tesla Middle School 2 years ago. We used Tesla Middle School because I know how much more challenging it is at that middle school level. And we defer the middle school students over to Tesla Middle School. We haven't had all parents take that deferment. Some parents have said no, and some parents have then pulled their kids. We share this information with our neighboring districts. Our agreement, cross-boundary, is people don't re-enroll somebody else's expelled student. We honor those expulsions. We offer educational opportunities during expulsion. That's called ELP. We're merging that in with the work that we're doing at Digital and Achieve to make sure their kids are getting all the supports that they can. But we have to make sure that safety is the first thing that comes out of our mouths when we talk about what it means to come to school. And when we get these egregious levels of behavior, we do respond to them.
And now some time for celebrations. So Coronado, decrease in behavior incidents by 40% from 23-24 to 24-25. So when we reached out to the principal, these are some of the things that they are doing, to include proactive check-in and check-out with at-risk students. It's an opportunity that for the students to know that they have an adult that they can check in with on a regular basis to make sure that they're on track. Reduction of peer conflicts through consistent cell phone enforcement. Clear and consistent family communication regarding consequences. Again, that family-school communication is critical. Dean visits twice a year to 9th grade classes to revisit policies, procedures, and answer questions students may have on expectations. Because we know we teach the expectations, but we need to go back and reteach and reteach, right? And so that we're all on the same page and we are meeting those expectations. And when we aren't meeting those expectations, what are we doing to support the youth so that they can? And then Russell Middle School. Negligible change from 23-24 to 24-25. They have high and clear expectations, logical consequences, high levels of supervision during unstructured times, because we know unstructured times, that is a time where sometimes things get out of control. So the fact that they have high levels of supervision, they're being proactive about that. Parent engagement, again, that's a theme throughout. Teacher expectations for classroom management, and focusing on academic engagement, and also personal responsibility. So when a mistake does occur, how does my action impact not only myself, but how does it impact others?
So wait, go back one more.
Yeah, you bet.
So are we to infer then that Russell had a low quantity of incidences?
They just didn't have an
increase or a
significant
decrease?
change, right,
And we're highlighting it because it stayed stable?
right.
We're highlighting it for, we've had, there's another piece to the Russell that I asked them to put this in here. If we remember, Russell took on a new 6th grade as Jenkins relocated there. That is a prime opportunity for us to lose the ability to manage the school the way we normally manage the school. And so even in that middle school is difficult, What Russell has projected is very clear sets of expectations, very clear levels of accountability. And even with that great distractor of what's happening upstairs, I can't believe my best friend's former person that they used to know is now upstairs and I can't wait to go poke them. You know, I'm making middle school fun of how middle schoolers act. What Russell did was steady Eddie. And so now that's not a win. The win is we're seeing decreases in behavior, but I did want to share that we saw the decrease at Coronado in a stable environment, and what we saw at Russell was not an increase when we could have lost the farm. We could have lost the farm. And Doherty gets credit for that as well, and really, the real winner in all of that from the middle schools, and I'm sorry we don't have a slide for it, is actually Jenkins. Right, we split that community and put them in 2 different schools, and those kids were focused, they're learning. The soft data that's come back from the states is Jenkins has continued to be a high-performing middle school in spite of being relocated to 2 different buildings. So to what I think you would ask me in a more direct question is with high and clear expectations and logical consequences, we have a very manageable system.
And then finally, Edison. They had consistent reported incidents between 23, 24, 25, 26 school year, 24, 25, excuse me, despite the overall district numbers that we've seen. So when asked about strategies, and Robin asked her ILT team, and you can see that there are a couple of quotes up here. Culture. Our staff is a family. While each individual teacher may have a roster of 20 kids, they are all our kids. If a kid in kindergarten is struggling, there may be a 3rd grade teacher in the hall on plan time helping that student. Robin frequently says, see a need, meet a need. And then the next quote says, Robin leads in a solution-driven manner, which is growing us in a direction to teach children the skills they are demonstrating they need to learn. What's the solution? Let's get it done. If we don't know what the solution is, let's figure it out and make sure it aligns with our code, our core values, not just check a box. Humor, fun, focus, and getting down to business. A beautiful balance of all of these attributes exists, and I feel our kids feel it and see it, so they get opportunities to live it. And so on to actionable steps. You have heard Superintendent Gall and others talk about the team of teams approach. And then we also have an area model. So all of the chiefs that have now been reorganized to align what we're doing as a district is going to help us to align our work across the district. And hopefully when we see you again next year, we'll see decreases in these behavior incidents because we are going to be really working together between departments and breaking down silos. Also, that data-driven targeted intervention supports, recognizing what the need is and intervening quickly, not waiting until it becomes a bigger problem. Creation of support plans for students displaying behaviors. So if we recognize a need that a student is struggling with the expectations, we are going to get in, develop a plan, and support those students. We also have a development of a full continuum of placements for students with disabilities with the inclusion support classrooms, so that continuum of supports that we have throughout our system. And then Superintendent Gall mentioned the middle school accountability framework and really honing in on that and meeting the needs quickly. And this is just another visual representation, the team of teams. You can see in the center, D11 student success. That is our ultimate goal. And so the area model, you can see the breakdown of the folks that are part of each area, as well as the student services department. There are a lot of folks that are supporting our students, working directly with our family. You can see at the bottom the family, school, and community partnerships that we have. And with all of us working together, we are going to see higher levels of student success.
We get the question time.
I think we are at the question time.
Is there anything you want to?
I just am appreciative of Dr. Schulte taking on the role that she's taken on this year. As you can see, what you see kind of in this team of teams thing is we're not thinking about student success as solely a siloed space. I will tell you that the data still reads in a similar manner of how we were structured last year, which was in a siloed space of the state mandates that this is what we report, and if we have infinitely more others than we do anything, then we just were looking at that passively. There's a much more active way in how we're addressing the needs that happen in each building. I know that there are still a lot of anecdotes, and we're happy to take those questions and comments and direction from the board. What I share to everyone is if this doesn't feel how your building or your classroom runs, please let us know.
Yes.
We want to know that. The other thing I'll stand very firmly on, because I said it from the dais last year, is we are done with the ways of the past. The other piece that Dr. Schulte has joined me on is we have started conversations with some external partners of how do we bring the language of what has been labeled as social emotional learning into the idea of character and values-based frameworks for children to have skills that fit our graduate profile. So we hope to be able to come to the board in the spring with a way that we want to transition that over time. There's really not a ton of difference in those different skill sets. It's just whether we look at them as an opportunity to gain that or if it's a deficit mindset of what you don't have. And we're trying to be in the former of how do we build children towards resiliency instead of saying, I know you don't have resiliency. Now, that's a fine line, and I'm certain somebody will email me or text me later on what I know or what I don't know. But what I do know is that systems with high expectations have to have scaffolds in there for people to be able to learn those skills to be able to meet those expectations. That is our goal in this idea of characters as values-based. I will tell you that that is a big pendulum swing, not in District 11, in public education writ large. I heard other candidates this morning talking about, or this afternoon, talking about families as partners in this work. The other thing that I've been clear about is we will never have enough money to cure all the challenges that exist in our city and our society. We want to focus on building readers, writers, and arithmeticers. That's a new one, we'll write that one down from my lack of English, who are equipped to handle the challenges that come forward in their lives. And then when we get to this smaller subgroup of students who have greater needs, we want to be able to steer them and their families in directions where they can get the help that they actually need to overcome that. We can't be the space where all problems are dropped off on our doorstep and think that we can solve them. We get less money per pupil every year. We have 85% of our budget that's taken on by salaries, of which we need, and those salary increases will increase at a rate greater than any new monies will ever come to the system. So to be clear, we want to engage with our families, we want our students to be successful, but we are not going to sit around and hold hands and ask everybody if they feel okay to get ready for school. We are ready for school when we show up, and the children who are not ready, we will find the scaffolds for them to be ready. But we're taking a leap forward this year that says this is our expectation, and then we'll fill in the gap for the kids who can't meet it instead of just assuming everybody's not ready for that expectation.
Okay.
We ready for your questions?
Yeah, we'll open it up for board discussion. Thoughts, questions, concerns? Director Haverly, you've got your hand up.
I just have a few. The first one, is this only at the school level that we're taking this data, or is it all levels, like transportation, behavior on buses? Has that been-
Transportation should have access to report behaviors. They report them through the school, is how the protocols are. We can double up to see if we see that same level of inconsistency. I could imagine that a bus driver once or twice has tried to report something, and maybe somebody said, call me later.
So
and
this
then maybe
data
they don't report it.
is not reflective of
It
transportation?
is.
It is, okay.
But again, I can't give you an R
It's supposed to
squared.
be, but it doesn't always
Supposed to
happen.
be.
Can you define what unsafe behavior is? What does that mean?
I can, I have the state reportable code here, and it clearly defines it, so just bear with me for a moment. don't know exactly where it is in this document, but I will find it.
If you can go back and pull one of those slides which one more. Yeah. But here at the high school
That's high
level,
school.
yeah, 28 incidents of unsafe behavior.
I was expecting a large number for cell
Oh,
phones.
but when you look at the middle school, it's
Right.
566.
I mean, that's a pretty big umbrella.
It's the same thing like middle school. When you look at the dress code, it's 50, around 49. But I think I saw high school, it was 5, and I think Director Bankus,
Pardon me?
the dress code violations at the high school level, dress code violations, it's at 5.
I think Director Bankus could hand out 5 in about 5 seconds.
Whenever you visit a high school.
There's always dress code violations when you
Yeah.
visit a high school.
Oh, I see.
Do you have another one while they're searching for that?
Yeah, so while you're
Maybe I
searching
can-
for that, the other, I have 2 more. What about consequences? Are those recorded? What are they? I mean, is it just, well, you're gonna get a verbal warning, hey, don't do that again? Or is there actual teeth to it?
Yeah, so we give that authority to the principals. And I know that there is still some concern from some staff members that I send something down and then it comes back and it is inconsistent or not known what that consequence is. I think we can pull reports to
We can pull discipline-related reports from the same system for consequences.
Because I can remember putting into, what, no. Darren, help me out. What is
Q.
No, not,
He's got
after
it.
Q.
Pre-Q, Alp,
After Q, we're,
Power School.
yeah, Power School, right? There's so many of them. That you'd put it in there, but then there wouldn't be any report back on what was the outcome, so then I would have to follow up with that. And in a lot of cases, teachers either don't have the time to do that, or they forget because there's so much on their plates.
So we will provide second quarter update on this. We'll come up with a closure ratio of how many things sit open and unacted upon. And then what I don't want to do, if there are concerns with the quality of the closure, like that doesn't meet your expectation, well, I'd like to take those offline for the individual schools. But we'll report a metric through the data team that actually says X number of incidents put in should have a very close to X letter Y number of closures that are met, so we can't leave them open-ended.
So on the last slide, the D11 Student Success Star,
Yes.
and I know that this is probably the way you intended it, but what I'm missing in here, I see all sorts of different titles for all sorts of different jobs, for all sorts of different adults.
Yes.
I don't see anything in there about students being responsible for their own success. So there's a lot of things on adults' plates, but students don't have any personal responsibility. And I'm sure that that's the way that you designed that particular slide. But I want to make sure that kids are understanding that they have a responsibility
Absolutely.
in, handling their own behavior as
Yes.
well.
And I think by looking at all of these adults on this slide, we have the exact same philosophy as we want them to understand that your actions affect not only yourself, but other people
Yep.
also.
Yep.
So we are all messaging the same thing.
And although the slide doesn't show it, to my monologue there, or my soapbox about character development that is centered on the students.
Yep.
And if you recall the shift that we made in academics and really the focus of the year on student agency is actually saying that it's not just the quality of the teacher that determines whether or not there's learning. It's the participation of the student in the learning continuum that is now a center part of our overall focus. Without getting into some of the slides, the anecdotes from our instructional empowerment schools have been that their behaviors are checking themselves because the students are now active in that learning environment, and that many of our behaviors, I don't want to say all or most, I'll say many, are manifestations of a child's discomfort with the learning environment. I will sit quietly until you ask me to read out loud because I am not confident in my reading. And so then either I cower to that or I act out to a space that Ms. Hafley says, get out of my class, go somewhere else. All that is really about, I haven't been comfortable with the learning environment, and the agency work is starting to bring that to bear. I am immediately thinking about our Audubon visits and the work that Aaron shared in Florida to a national audience on his high flyers now became active learners. And some of them were 504 kids, some of them were SPED kids, and some of them were just the kids that we couldn't get our arms around. And then what we found was actually they were engaged in the learning in a way that helped them get to a space where behavior wasn't the way that they acted out.
So then finally, last one, teachers, with all the PD that they're going through, is there any on classroom management? Is there a lot? Because teachers are telling me I need PD on classroom management. And truthfully, when I was teaching, I didn't have the trouble other teachers had. I had good relationships with my kids. It doesn't mean that I didn't send them down to the office from time to time. But what I noticed, at least during my career, and that was a long time ago, it's not now, but we never had. And I say that never, I'm going to underscore that, because I cannot remember a time when we had classroom management training. We had training for all sorts of things, which was great. But classroom management training really needs to be underscored for teachers. They're, at least when they're talking to me, they're begging for it.
Carol, can you highlight
I
the
can.
differentiated PD we offered and how it was by self-selection?
I can, yes, and I think I can speak to what we've already done, but also a continued call moving forward and sort of explain how we're weaving that into further PD opportunities. So to begin this year, I think that same call that you asked for of like, do we see professional development just around classroom management? When we offered new teacher PD, what we actually gave adults this year was the agency to select the sessions that were most appropriate to their learning, right? So we had standardized sessions around the core priorities instructionally for us, but then what we saw in one of the highest attended sessions was actually on some fundamentals around like classroom setup, right? And so much of the feedback that we received from new teachers was that was one of the more actionable sessions, right? They could immediately take it back into classes. Then last year, when we identified this continued need in our system, we offered individualized differentiated PD by one of our most experienced teachers who had left the classroom and is like deep in that work. And we worked with school embedded coaches and principals and teachers to say, is this an opportunity that you want to engage in? And so rather than go in a huge space with everybody, they were small day-long sessions of less than 10 participants. Superintendent Gall was able to pop in on a couple of those. But in those spaces, teachers were really able to share what they needed, and we designed in the moment around those individual needs. Moving forward, I think there's a need to weave classroom management into all of the PD that we offer, which says like, it's not a standalone thing, right? Instructional strategies that engage kids are rooted in some of the philosophies in classroom management, but we need that to be connected to the learning in Eureka, right? We need that to be connected to some of our other instructional priorities. So as we move forward, kind of three pathways. One, teacher agency and choice in selecting sessions that are most appropriate to their needs and learning in the classroom. Two, we'll continue to offer standalone professional development when it makes sense and is appropriate. And so if someone's watching saying like, I really need that support, we are entirely structured around the needs of a teacher right now. And so we are very excited about meeting those needs as they come up. And we've been deploying already in the first 5 days. I have a team going out tomorrow actually on a first year teacher who said, I'm putting my hand up, please send support. We're out there tomorrow. And then third, all of our PD moving forward is focused on the needs of students, right? Which is really at the root of all of this is how are we engaging kids in the classroom?
So
Dr. Hafley, sorry.
I'm sorry, that's an ongoing thing. They can choose classroom management PD all year long if they needed to.
Yeah, so we
And the
have
first
completely
one-
restructured the academic team this year, which we introduced last year in May, that they are ServPro would be my business model. You got a flood in the basement, somebody shows up, 3 days later you're watching the ball game in the basement. We are deploying staff, not I got to wait for a PD day, does it fit into the PD schedule? We are not waiting for that because we can't leave it to chance. So my obligation to the board as you watch all of this is when you have examples that it did not happen, let us know and we will be responsive. I know that some teachers will be resistant to raise their hand that they need support because maybe they asked their principal or their AP or their dean and they got something and it didn't quite work. We have to get high-quality instruction right. Part of high-quality instruction is an expectation of how we exchange learning and information in a setting, of which behaviors is a part of that. We do not want to treat behaviors alone as its own thing, because then what we do is we end up playing whack-a-mole and just chasing behavior around the system. The interconnectivity of who we teach, how we teach, and what we teach is the way we have evolved the academic experiment to go far.
I have that definition of unsafe behavior real quick for you from the state. It's detrimental to the welfare or safety of other students or school personnel, or that create a threat of physical harm to the student, self, or others.
Okay, so it's more
It's more
egregious.
physical, yeah.
Okay.
But at a sufficiently egregious level, it would be categorized
Exactly.
differently, not
right.
within other.
Threat is kind of a key piece there. If you say it versus if you do it, then it would move to another category.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, observations, Director Jorgensen?
If you go back to that slide with the 3 boxes.
The very first?
Yeah.
Year 1, year 2, year 3? Okay.
3 boxes.
Three
Whatever.
There we go.
So on the Y side here, did teachers, so it sounds like teachers got the chance to choose to get PD on classroom management if they wanted. With all the behaviors things we've heard, I probably would have made it mandatory, but that's operations, not governance. But have they been trained on, you mentioned logging the incidents. Does every teacher know where and how to log things so that even if they're busy, it's just a quick thing in PowerSchool under this tab? Do they all know that?
They do. Yes.
There's an on-demand video available that principals can use, but in their back-to-school meetings, that's one of the pieces that they hit. Also, the new reporting mechanism that we put in last year that this is derived from this year because it's going to continue, creates that two-way dialogue between the principal and the teacher. That was the big change in where we asked them to report in PowerSchool, because now when a student is referred to the office, they can have a conversation back through PowerSchool, letting them know what happened, because that was some of what we were hearing from teachers is when they're sent there, they don't hear what happened because of it, so they can check that.
Like Director Hayes is
Yes.
your question.
And reduce the click path, to your point, about the time that it takes.
Yeah.
To minimize that.
Okay, good. And then those, now when teachers input those, is there a way for admin or deans to adjust those records to make their school look better later? If a teacher goes, this is egregious, habitual, detrimental, whatever it was, and the admin goes in there and can change those words so it doesn't look as such, is there any way for them to manipulate that, or are we trusting our teachers to put in a record and that's what happens?
I'll let Dr. Colicky comment on whether or not people can actually change a record. I think the way it's written is that the teacher makes an input and the administration makes a comment there afterwards. But I'm fairly certain that the administration doesn't have rights into the teacher's comment space. Now, we will report a closure ratio or percentage that might show that we might still have unanswered, which is just as unsupportive to a teacher.
Right.
But I'm confident that what we don't have is a brewing conspiracy of I undo the incident that you put in.
That's correct.
And if that's happening, you'd like to know that.
Again, if you have an example, please share it with me and we will investigate it and report back.
I may or may not.
Okay.
So that's why I asked the question. I would be aware that we can change that. So, and then the bullet points are on the right block there. Were those all accomplished since you have an August 6th deadline there? Was that something that building principals for sure went over so that we can get a handle on incidents?
Yeah, anybody want to cover the ABCs, the area soups, anybody over there?
That
Actually,
was on August 1st, the principals heard that, and then at their first building meeting day, that was part of the learning in every building meeting day was to review that. And remember, this year was a review of it because the new process was actually put in a year ago, so that video still exists. That's why it's done through a video too, because it can be watched on demand, because we know as we're standardizing the process, there is another button you could click in there. We've trained people way better this last year to go away from that button and report over here because it allows the two-way dialogue.
Okay.
But anytime an incident is reported in the wrong place, we have the on-demand video to say, hey, remember, if you got cobwebs on this because you haven't had to do it in a while,
What's
here's
the name
where
of
it's
that,
at.
just for anybody watching, they go.
A quick incident report.
A quick incident report, okay, good, thank you, that's the title there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned in that last bullet point on the right block, utilize the behavior matrix. I've found a behavior matrix or a progressive discipline chart on our website. My question is, when was the last time that was reviewed and updated, or could it be streamlined? Because it's quite a few pages long. And if I'm a teacher with kids trying to go, all right, what does little Timmy need right now? I mean, is there anything, because what everyone doesn't want, I didn't want, is the minute I felt like I had to call an admin into the room or send that child out, I lost the authority and the respect of that child because I couldn't handle it myself. And not that it's out of pride, but it is that, principals come in and it's like, okay, we're taking over because you can't handle it, and that's what kids see sometimes. So has this been updated or reviewed to be simple in the progressive mention that you mentioned earlier, Mr. Gall? And if not, do we need to look at that?
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was revised last year.
That's correct.
It was not with significant revision.
Okay.
So again, if we want to discuss,
Updated.
we have a quarterly commitment to the ABCs to the board.
Yeah.
If you'd like, if there's a thumbs for us to bring that matrix forward and get input from the board. Although falling within operations, we are more than open to hear the board's review of said matrix.
Maybe I'd rather have a pulse up from teachers on ease of use first. If it's working, great, but if it's like, I looked at it and I'm like, I don't know if I would even know where I'd be at on that matrix.
The reality of it is, I don't think many people go to the matrix. I think it is, that's enough
The
and going
principals
down.
communicate.
Right, and I think the administrator is then thinking about the matrix of the appropriate level of accountability that matches said behavior. There is and should still be the opportunity for administrators to run their buildings without us being so tight that they can't make those day-to-day bets. And yet there needs to be accountability to some of those numbers are just not putting us in the place that we need to be. If the other three slided 1 year, 1 year, 2 year, 3, our belief is that as we get tighter on the expectations for the reporting, it will be clearer where those spaces are that somebody is giving too much. Now, I think any of you on your school visits can easily tell us what is the difference between a school with a culture of high expectations and accountability and a school without that.
Yeah.
Right? And again, anecdotally, by all means, when you have those school visits, feel free to say, I'm not sure what you all are briefing is happening here.
Okay.
You might want to get a view on this or that classroom, and we will be responsive to that in the same way that we are being responsive, thank you, to that first year teacher who said, please come by.
Excellent. 2 more quick questions. If teachers didn't choose to get classroom management as it was optional, were they given any sort of tools or, did their building leadership develop a plan that said, here's how we're doing things at Galileo, or here's how we're doing things at Edison, so that even if they didn't have a classroom management plan, they knew what their principal wanted to do in that autonomy?
That's the expectation of every building leader, to provide those basic functions inside their building. And again, if absent, please let me know and we will correct that.
And maybe it's on, if your desire to go, hey, every building admin, I want to know what that was that you share with staff, just so we make sure that the board wants to know everybody has one. I don't know. I want to make sure that teachers know, as I don't want to hear again in visits of behavior's still an issue, and because there's some sort of disconnect between what we say at a board meeting, which very few people watch, what you say at K-12 principals meetings, and then what teachers are getting in the building. Because they're still going, my little Timmy's still doing this or that, and I'm just pulling my hair out, and when he's absent, I'm thinking the good work because my classroom can run. And that's what we don't want to have happen. So that, I'll leave it up to you. The last question is, the attendance tardy issues on the data here were like the second highest bars on these graphs. We adjusted what tardiness meant in that policy. Do we need to go back and revise that so that this can be accurate or aligned better for data purposes? And did we miss that mark last year with tardiness and we need to go back and look at that?
No, I think it's again a reflection of tighter practice in taking it.
Okay.
We were very, very loose starting going into last year that we really worked on alongside cell phones, so.
Yeah, I think if there's an action from the board on that, it's not really internal, it's external. Again, in listening to the candidates, it's always interesting to hear how people who aren't in our insular world are thinking about it. The challenge that still exists, not in District 11, but in America, is it's okay to not be in school. We normalized that through COVID. We said, you don't have to be here. And now we're struggling with conveying back that the value proposition, everybody at this table comes from a different story, that public education is the thing that got us to the chair we are in today. And again, not a District 11 problem, a state and El Paso County, a national problem is chronic absenteeism is through the roof. Tardiness is crazy. We are all okay with scheduling dental appointments in the middle of the school day because that is what works at the ease of the convenience of our daily life. Now, there are ways for us to access learning when we miss the learning opportunity. We are getting better at that. But if the board is looking to be a true partner on tardiness and or absenteeism and attendance, it's helping us get that message out that says, please, 90% is too low. We used to compete for who went not the whole school year without missing a day, but who goes an entire school experience without missing a day. And we have very few examples of that now. Excused absences, unexcused absences. We play sports in the middle of the day. We do all kinds of things in the middle of the learning day. When we went after attendance last year, we saw that one of the major issues we had was excused absences. Every time a child is not in front of the teacher of record or what is on their schedule, doesn't mean we're not adding to learning when we give kids other opportunities, but we are missing that core learning.
Yeah.
So please, please, please send your children to school. Roll them over and say, come on, it's time to go, I took your temperature, you don't have a fever, let's go to school.
Last question, that on-demand video, where do staff access that? Is that on PowerSchool's login under behavior or tutorials, or where do they find that?
We'll put it as a banner on the webpage for the next couple of weeks, so if we could take a note that the banners that flow through will say, missed this training, it's available here on the d11.org webpage.
Okay, great, thank you. Sorry I had so many.
Okay, moving on to any other board members, any thoughts or questions at this point?
They covered it.
Anything else from you guys? I will try to provide some feedback, probably wearing my parent hat more so than the teachers they've spoken who've been in the classroom. My expectation as a parent when my child goes into a classroom is what you talk about, Superintendent Gall, that the child gets the highest quality instruction. So if there are repeat high flyers in those classes that are constantly disrupting that instruction and taking away the experience my child is getting in that class, then as a parent, it's a concern to me. And if it gets an unsafe condition, then as a parent, that's what I hear all the time, that I'm going to look at other options. What I would expect as a parent and now as a board member as well is that at the beginning of the school year, all schools, the expectations are from your principals through your area superintendents is that they set high expectations for the entire schools out there. When they have open houses and parents are walking in, get all the parents together and communicate that right there to the parents. These are the expectations that we expect, including attendance that you are talking about. Wake up your kids. We cannot educate our kids if they are not there in the classroom. Open houses are the best time when we have the highest amount of foot traffic in our schools to get parents together in one single area and communicate that. And then hold those students to those expectations. Students naturally, from what I've seen, they tend to push boundaries and try to get away with it. But if we set those expectations in that very first month consistently, then they respond to those high expectations, and then most of these problems are going to dissipate. So that is my thing. And then there was that continuum of supports that was talking about. Is that something that in one of the slides it talked about somewhere out there, I think
Action steps.
at the inclusion.
Long slide deck, sorry, you're
Yeah.
moving forward on the next topic.
Is that something that, sometimes when I'm at schools, that type of support that is available to IEP students or students on special needs, it's limited and the number of slots available are filled up, and then other students who need that support are not available to access that support. Is there anything from the board level that you want from us to provide that type of support for all students who
I think you're asking me, do we have enough in-school supports? Is that
Well,
what you're
I
asking?
think if you go back to that slide, what I'm talking about.
The continuum slide of placements.
Yeah,
Education support
I it
specialists.
said, let me see what it,
We're
the
almost there.
educational lingo. Right there.
Yep.
Go back, one slide. Okay, it talks about, what was it, the fourth bullet point, development of a full continuum of placements for students with disabilities. Do we have, if there are students, I've been in schools, and I'll give you an example.
This is about our inclusion support program, so again, Deirdre would be best to
Okay.
explain this, but I think Carol can handle it and give a couple of examples of how we have sought to provide the least restrictive, most inclusive environment, and yet also acknowledge that some students have a specific set of needs that when served together can be better supportive of the student. So do you want to
Yeah.
give just like an example like at Stratton?
So one example I will give you, I was at an elementary school just this last week, and there is a student at kindergarten level that likes to take off from the classroom and run. So the teacher has to constantly monitor this kid, and even when I was in the classroom and the teacher turned her back and the student took off. And now you have to call principal or somebody to chase down the student down the hallways, and he doesn't, take off through an open doorway or something like that. Do those students that need more monitoring, is that what we
So-
provide?
To what Superintendent Gall just spoke to, I think that idea of what is the least restrictive environment where the kid can get the best access to high quality instruction, and kindergartner is a great example of this. We have all of these supports in place wrapped around that child to provide every support possible in that classroom to help that student acclimate to that environment. Certainly, if that becomes an ongoing need, right? A kindergartner is a great example because all of our kindergartners are at day 6, right? As they kind of learn what school looks like. And we have kids that have been in preschool for 3 years next to students who this is their first day away from mom or dad, right? And so we're really trying to wrap all of these supports in a different way this year than before, where sometimes we were siloed, right? If it was a child with a disability, we had to call that team. And if it was a child who wasn't, we called this team. What we're looking at now is it's just a kid, right? It doesn't really matter what that label is. We're gonna wrap the same level of support to make sure that that child is successful. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah, and then you were talking about Stratton, maybe that.
Well, I think the example that I'll dovetail on Dr. Fry's thing is, again, is if people do watch Wednesdays, please send your kids and sign them up for Universal Pre-K. The goal of Universal Pre-K is to acclimate your child to a learning environment such that they are ready to be in spaces where there are expectations. We don't have heavy hands in kindergarten, but we do need a kindergarten to function and not have runners and have kids seeking to play hide and seek, because the entirety of the system needs to function. So please sign up for Universal Pre-K. We are the largest provider in El Paso County, although the third largest school district in the county. So I'm excited to continue that. To answer the more specific question, at this time we don't need anything more other than families to see the value in exposing their children to school as early as possible, and then partnering with the school team to understand that when we get to particularly non-IEP type behaviors, which is maybe just John or Sally thinks it's fun to run away from the teacher, that the parents are partners with the school that says that's not a behavior that's going to work for us in school. So we don't get into that spaces of this isn't a place where other children want to come to learn because everybody's running after John or Sally.
Okay.
Sorry to all the Johns and Sallys.
Thank you. Appreciate the data, and we look forward to follow up data through the rest of the school year. I think this is something that the board is interested in. Without even talking to the rest of the board, I think this is something that is a board priority. What we are looking for as this process goes, and there was a slide which talked about tier 2 and tier 3, that consistency of application, the behavior matrix and consistency of recording data as well. And as we go through, we'll keep me informed, and we can bring this back to the board at the next time. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda, which is the bond conversation. So I know that the board before the summer break, we did engage in some of this conversation into looking at ways that we can address some of the facility challenges that District 11 faces. I know we have a considerable amount of facility work going on at Jenkins and also at Palmer, and we looked internally at our funding structure to fund both those things. But going forward, especially at this time of the year when you go and visit Wasson Academic Campus, or I was at even Russell, which is a fully air-conditioned building, but some of the areas yesterday were pretty hot when we were at that open house. So how do we ensure that in this day and age, every student has and every staff member has a comfortable learning environment where they can thrive and put forth their best effort? And part of it is having this conversation about the bond, looking into the future and see when is the right time to go and ask the community for support for additional renovation of our school buildings. Superintendent Gall, with that, I'm going to come to you for you to set up this conversation.
Thank you, President Malpacum. To continue this conversation that we had started a little bit last year, but now bringing it to a work session of public light. How old am I? I'm so old, but not older than the average building in District 11. I am 58 years old, and the average building in District 11 is 65 years old. Our average age of a student, I guess, is a 6th grader, which makes them 11. 11-year-old is the average age of our product and our customer, who is in buildings that is not just older than their parent, might actually be their grandparents' age. So I just framed for you, as we start this conversation, and having lived, we all lived through a Jenkins experience last year, our newest middle school required $30-some-odd million worth of repair. We are on the thinnest ice of any district that I have led, and I have now been in 4 districts, and or any other district that I have visited and or sold to when I was in a sales space, than I've ever seen before. We are one phone call away. We are one more either fire department visits or heavy rain or spring snow away from being in a position where we won't have the money to actually make the repair. It is time for us to ask our community to, what's that?
I'm sorry, Melissa went out.
The doorbell, the forever ringing doorbell?
Yeah.
We've never heard that door. Part of our upgrade to central office building has been a new doorbell. And I know if you can hear it, I know it's working really well. Okay. To reframe where we started this, nothing could have been more true to date than the work that Mr. Shannon Bigham brought to us in our demographic review. Every area that we have invested of his recommendation, we have seen that or greater in return. And yet, the system is still struggling. Our high schools other than the very specific work that we're doing at Palmer, have not had major renovations. And remember, we're $20+ million into Mitchell, and none of that is a major renovation. Every one of those has been a small project. Our high schools have not been touched since they were built in the 70s. And again, I happen to be a little bit older than that, and we have started with Palmer High School. But this also idea of a fast-track facelift, when you drive by most of our elementary schools, they look like they were built in the 70s and the 80s. From the inside, many of them are bright and refreshing. But from the outside, we still say to people, anybody moved with their spouse and done house shopping? Sometimes you never get inside the house because you drive by with the realtor and you go, nope. You have no idea if there's a brand new kitchen inside that house. We've done good work from the inside out, but I do think it's time for us to ask our community, if the average age is 65, and when we get into that work and you see what those facilities index scores are, what do we really want for our kids that are in the system for their kids to inherit? Do we really want them to walk that same exact hallway? Yes, we want to honor the legacy every time we touch one of our buildings, but we have to embrace the future for this district. This again coming from that demographic study, continue high quality school renovations. I don't think we have the slide in here, but you've seen it before, our decrease in enrollment over time. That slide actually has 2 bumps in that, and both those bumps were when we opened new buildings. When we open new buildings, people are responsive to that. They go, wow, a new building, that's interesting. We will see that as well when Jenkins reopens and Palmer opens going forward. I'm going to share this slide and then I'm going to hand it over to Brandon just because I asked the team to build this slide. I know it's very hard, particularly in the community that we live in, and how people talk about fixed incomes and how they talk about taxation and they talk about my right to control my own money. Everybody around us in the last 20 years has been bonding to invest in the structures and the facilities of where their kids either went to school, where go to school, or where they are just singly homeowners in the system. Again, I heard from candidates today, because they have to be D11 residents to serve on the board, having a high-quality school system is important to me even if my kids aren't here anymore, because it actually attracts and retains the value of our system. We have 2 that are actually running for bonds right now, Manitou and Cheyenne Mountain. And so a lot of this, and I'll cover the polling data when we get to the end of this, that we did over the spring. Everybody will tell you it's not the right time, it's not the right time, it's not the right time. Well, over the last 20 years, it seems like it's been a hell of a good time for everybody else, but us when we lost by 11 votes. We lost by 11 votes. That's crazy that District 11 could lose by 11 votes. But we didn't lose by 11 votes. We lost by 10,011 votes. Because the authority to tax your community, to go put a bunch of shovels in the ground and rebuild the schools has to be a majority. Has to be more than 12 votes, which would have had us on the +1. Otherwise, we would have people lining up and saying no. Our work at Palmer is showing people that we are invested in recapitalizing this district, and the students are ecstatic. And the staff, thank you to the staff for handling the operational changes. They've handled it with great aplomb. We've had 0 complaints coming to my level on my classroom. I can't do this anymore. I can't do that. Same thing with Jenkins. We talked about how thankful we are to the Jenkins community, the Doherty community, to the Russell community for supporting that. Please go visit Jenkins and see. I get it. It's a modular. Every kid deserves a fully air-conditioned building that is fluid and that allows them to move. And we've done an awfully great job of making that so, even in a modular space. Those are the nicest modulars I've ever seen. Over to you, Dr. Comfort, to talk in depth about our opportunity.
Yeah, good evening, Board. We've discussed this before. We have kind of the bond opportunity at the top. Remember, that's not even close to our total bonding capacity because of the increase in our wealth as a community, as a district. And so we're bucketing this into a few different places. We're talking about $750 million. Again, we need some transformational investments across the system. We're not building large new schools. That's not in our future, but we do need some transformational investments. And so as we've discussed before, we do want to rebuild a middle school. We think that We have to do some things with our middle school portfolio, and one of those is make a significant investment. We do want to complete the entire Palmer master plan. We want to repay that existing COP that currently our MLO is helping fund. Remember, when we do that, we then have some MLO money that we can put towards some other district initiatives that could be significant and game-changing for this district for years to come. And then we would have the money there to do one additional project. So that could be a really significant renovation or rebuild of an elementary. There's a lot of things. Remember, we have every single data set you can imagine to inform this. All the way back to the facilities master plan, to the educational adequacy, to the facility index. I have every toggle point you can imagine if you want to say, I want to prioritize free and reduced lunch rate, bop, bop, bop. I want to prioritize where enrollment challenges are, bop, bop, bop. What you're going to find is the same school surface. Palmer obviously was one of those schools. Jenkins was not, but we had to do what we had to do at Jenkins. So outside of transformational investment, we also want to do some large-scale modernization. This can be the opportunity where we never talk about HVAC ever again. We never have to get that email after we talk about HVAC and somebody says, well, only half of the classrooms at West Campus are air conditioned, right? I get that email every single time. I'll probably get it tonight after we have this conversation. We can put that to bed once and for all. And the superintendent will know, because I'm in charge of operations, when we had the heat wave the week before school started, I was like, thank you that it was the week before kids came back. And it wasn't when we had 25,000 kids in schools. We got really lucky, but we were 1 week away from being overrun with complaints because it was 100 degrees in Colorado Springs. We need to address HVAC. Superintendent Gall said, if you've been to our high schools, I'm really proud of the work that we've done at our high schools, especially Mitchell High School. We've done some great work there, but it hasn't been significant. You have the former principal of Coronado over there. We did some new flooring and we've done some painting, but we haven't done significant renovations to our high schools since they were built. Superintendent Gall said the average age of our building is 65 years. I want to put that into other statistic. 75% of this district's current square footage was built between the 50s and the 70s. And then it's a bell curve. There's a little bit before that, north and some of those buildings, and a little bit after that. But 75% of every single square foot that kids are walking in this district was built in those 2 decades or 3 decades. So we want to really modernize our high schools so that they stay attractive. And then we want to do significant work to middle schools. Again, we have to address the middle school portfolio. As you've been around at the beginning of the year, our building staff are doing and facility staff are doing everything they can to make those buildings look great. And there's lots of work to do there. So we have to do that. And then we want to make targeted investments. This doesn't mean elementaries get less. It just means it doesn't cost as much at an elementary school. $5 million at an elementary school, as a former elementary principal, I don't even know what I would have said to that. I mean, you can do crazy stuff with that kind of money. Where $5 million at a high school doesn't do a lot. And so we want to make some significant elementary investments. Obviously, we want to make sure our charters are supported, especially because that's law. And so you can kind of see how that's broken up across the $750 million. Again, that's just a concept and an idea. We can shift and adjust that all we want, but that's a really clear indication of where our strategy is. I right now can give you a project list at every single school. In 5 seconds, I can say, here's what needs to happen at every school. We also want to re-engage with all of those communities and say, if you got $2 million at Halbert, has anybody been to Halbert and seen the front of Halbert?
It's amazing.
I like that. I took pictures. Somebody thought I was taking pictures of kids. And I'm like, I promise I'm a district staff member. I had my badge up because I was blown away by the front of Halbert. Imagine if we gave $2 million to Halbert to do other work there. I mean, it would be transformational.
Right, and yet the playground at Halbert doesn't say it's an outdoor
Yes.
school, right? It's a giant paved sand, horrible parking lot. We made the investment up front. We have to finish those investments that the buildings tell you what they are. Again, if I use my language is curb appeal. When you drive by it, you got to say, I want to see more. I want to see more. If you pay attention to the small things, first of all, anybody watching, come into central office, go up and down our hallway. While we're waiting for student arts, we have put in the future of capital visions up and down the hallway. We had our partner AMP change the construction signs at Palmer to not just say AMP over and over again while things are crumbling and there are piles. We put what the buildings will look like
on the construction fence. You have to communicate to people what you're trying to get to instead of what people think they are going to lose. That and the things that we're doing, the walkthrough, we had the media all show up for the grand reopening of Jenkins. And that reporting was a heck of a lot different than it had been 6 months earlier about everybody taking pictures of cracks. And now you can't see them because there is no crack. So visioning forward that says these targeted investments, they're not a cost. It doesn't cost us $8 per month per $100,000 of assessed value. It's an investment that says this district will continue to serve its students and its population, not until the next building falls down, but until those kids come back. What is the thing that makes District 11 special? We hear it all the time. Please watch our social media. It's had a complete refresh. There's a piece on there of why District 11 on our Welcome Back Day at Robeson. And everyone said, I went to school here. My mom or my dad taught here. I've lived in this city the entirety of my life. We own the legacy of this city, and it's time for us to preserve that going forward.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Director Rayford.
So then the question is, how do you communicate that with staff? Just like Mr. X was saying, that you have to go beyond just the parents. How do you get that communication disseminated to
Realtors,
yeah.
Chamber of Commerce,
Let
business owners.
me get to it when we get to the poll.
older folk, grandparents?
Yeah, I'll get to it when we get to the poll.
Yeah, but I do want to say, it's the greatest opportunity for community engagement in decades in the district, right? When people get to be a part of designing what will happen, that's when people come. Have we had any issue with engagement about what we're doing at Palmer or even what we had to do in fast order at Jenkins? No. People want to show up to tell us what they want to see in those spaces. What we need is the funding in order to bring it to the community to say, what do you want to see in this space? If we let the Halbert community design their playground, I guarantee you it's not going to look like if I call a playground guy and say, can you put a playground there?
Yep.
And so that's a single amazing opportunity for the community to engage with the district. Okay, we've also talked about this before. This is just a build of the last slide. We can get into a bond cycle. This is how many districts, especially large districts, operate. We don't think about one bond every 2 or 3 decades, but instead we think about cycles. I will say if we pass a bond, I'm going to be really, really satisfied and happy that we're not even going to talk about bond cycles for a little bit. But we do want to think about an ongoing recapitalization effort in this district. We cannot go another 2 decades or 3 decades without investing in our campuses. Otherwise, we will be in the position where we're in, where again, I love the work that we're doing, but we are never catching up. We're always just like, well, we can't do the playground at Halbert, we can do the front. Well, we can't, we can do this. We're always having to pick and prioritize instead of doing big transformational projects.
And as Brandon gets ready to transfer slides, because we get normalized into how we normally spend, or how we're currently spending money. Bonds are for facilities, MLO are for peoples and programs. We are funding our capital program from our MLO right now because we don't have enough operational dollars to do that. Now that's not transparent. The MLO Oversight Committee, everybody has voted on that. That is funding the way that we do this. There is at least $20 million of new program and compensation available every year if we can put ourselves back into the buckets of every other district in America. You pass bonds for facilities, you maintain them out of general operations budget, that's a normal cost. The sink breaks, the thing goes, you need new carpet over there because the science class had way too much fun. Those are the normal ways you operate. But these, and I gotta be careful here because people, this happened at Jenkins. Like people don't understand that a new wing is $30 million. Repairing inside of a current building is $1.5 million or $2 million. Maintaining that space is in the management of what your facilities team does, which is maybe we needed some overtime, maybe we didn't. We have to put our money back into the spaces that it's supposed to go. So although a bond is not related to compensation, we've talked about this in other conversations, we're spending 60% of our money on instruction. We want to spend 70% of our money on instruction. Right now, starting salary went from 42 to 50 grand over the last couple of years. We've toyed with, how do we start at 70, go mid-career at 85, and anybody who wants to make a career in teaching makes $100,000 a year. We could do that if we weren't spending all our MLO on all these capital costs and all these other things that have happened in the past. We have massive amounts of milling and bonding capacity inside this district, and I won't make them go backwards, but over the last 20 years that we have not tapped into, that everybody else has tapped into. Nobody builds a building. Right now, we're building 2 buildings without bonding. We're doing that to show folks that we are actually great stewards of the dollar, and we believe so much in doing that that we're going to demonstrate it first. Both those lots at Jenkins and Palmer are clear, and in literally just weeks, we'll be pouring concrete pads, we'll be putting up steel girders, and we will be showing physically that it's not about what went away, it's about what's coming forward.
Yeah, just to expand, it will give the district, it will give the board the opportunity to control more of its future than hoping and waiting that the state increases the SFA, right? I mean, we can all forecast that's not gonna be great news. By freeing up how we use our MLO, the board would have at its discretion significant money to once and for all change how we compensate, how we do a variety of things. That is never coming in this year or next year or the next year's SFA. It is an opportunity that no other system around us has. We should be really grateful for the community support through that MLO and should be really intentional to make sure that we're maximizing its value for what the district actually needs. Okay, those are bond cycles. These are just some milestones and timelines. We had a slide about this last year. Again, lots have to go into a bond, which is why we had the conversation last spring and we continue to have the conversation. We know to do this right, we have to do this right by getting really intense and really communicative while we can until we can't say anything. And so you'll kind of see some of those timelines there. Again, finalized project list. If you asked me to give you a project list, I can send that to you tomorrow morning. We absolutely will go through an engagement with every single school community, but we have all of the data that we need, and then you can obviously see some of those formal steps that need to happen.
We contracted last spring with an organization to do some polling to understand what is and what is not the likelihood of support. Is there more than one slide here, or is it?
I think it's just the one.
Just the one, you can stay on it. The general number that we had shared in an executive session with the board is 60% favorability means that you're more likely than not to pass your bond. And what we saw was not a statistical difference in November of 25 or November of 26. And we saw a number of roughly 58% of likelihood that that bond would pass. That's close, and again, this is, actually, you were on the board, were you not, Director Ott, when we?
2021?
Yeah, when we missed by 11 votes. I can only imagine the anxiety of going through counts and recounts and messaging on what it means and what it doesn't mean. Our recommendation to the board is that we go November of 26, which gives us a little bit of time, as the rules work, is once ballot language is finalized, then we're hands off on what's happening with the ballot of the bond initiative. But we have runway right now to engage with our communities, if you go back a slide, and talk about building out an actual budget, an actual bond plan, go to the one with the milestones, sorry, where we actually say not a major investment in a middle school, but based upon the facilities index, what middle school? Now, we're not tipping any hands right now on which one we think that is, because we think it's important to hear from the community on what that is. But right now, the polling said you are just as likely to win in November of 25 as you are to win in November of 26, and both of them are really close on whether or not you'll actually win. We think waiting until November of 26 gives us an opportunity to, I said I would address your question, to start screaming and sharing the information of we believe in children, we believe in the future of District 11. This is a board and an administration that is here to stay, and we have the results that say we are moving in a direction that is actually answering, I believe it was Mr. X's Rotary thing, that are we making more friends and are we doing better for the good? Now, we might not answer everyone's specific need, but we are raising all boats in that regard, and so we think that you tasking us to actually build out that bond package for November of '26 positions us in what the polling said was the right thing. The polling is very clear. Parents are very responsive to new 21st century air-conditioned, safe buildings. Those are the things that we have to be able to promote, and we want to add to that sustainable. We have to acknowledge the challenges that exist in the monies that we spend on utilities and that we should not be spending on utilities. I ask the question all the time, why doesn't every building in Colorado Springs just have a west-facing wall of windows so we can all admire Pikes Peak? And the answer is, that's really hard to heat and cool and to keep that window clear of condensation and not run a crazy bill for your utilities. I think you saw in the Palmer work of, hey, let's do a geothermal. Let's actually, if we're going to make that level of investment, let's do this in a way. There's no irony lost on me in the individual conversations that I've had on places like Palmer and Jenkins, that we are so normalized to 65-plus-year-old buildings that people had said to me at Palmer when we initially pitched a reinvestment, one comment was, but what are you going to do about the air conditioners on the third floor? So there's no possibility that bonds go forward and every room is not modernized with conditioned air. No Russell-ish answer of, yes, there's air conditioning, you just can't feel it. Everybody needs conditioned air. Another one was, I just want to know that my ADA, my IEP, my special ed students, we meet ADA compliance and they can transit one building to another at Palmer High School, which they currently can't do. And the way the law is written is because it's an old building, we have a waiver, we have a workaround, but the way the law is written is a new building, there are no waivers and walkarounds. But the misunderstanding of what that investment means is people are still caught in well, is the elevator gonna work in the Ox building in Palmer? There has to be a way that we move our special ed students in an ADA compliant way when you make an investment in a new building. So embedded in all that, and I appreciate the lack of communication that there has been through the system. We think giving this another year, besides November of '25 is tomorrow, giving this full year gives us the ability to do a series of engagements with our community, hear where are the places they want us to invest, what are the areas and the buckets that are most responsive to them. We believe the polling is fairly consistent for that.
Okay.
I do want to take a second to talk about sustainability. I missed the meeting last year, at the end of last year when we had a capital conversation. I brought to this district this opportunity to make a significant sustainability investment through a process which is called an energy savings contract, called an ESCO, which is how do we take our savings that we can generate through utilities and buy in some features that we don't have. Do we have LED lights in every space? Do we have programmable thermostats? Are we modernizing our filtration to meet today's standards? Do we have shades that are helping to deter what our cooling costs can be in some of the spaces? I brought that recommendation in 2023 when I came here to demonstrate to the Board of Education at the time that there are ways for us to get creative in how to reinvest in our system, because I think we were still reeling from the lost bond. We have moved in a direction similar to that with our COP for Palmer and for Jenkins to be able to make that investment, which is borrowing against our own money. When this board decides that they want to go for a bond, it's my recommendation that you task us to make sustainability a portion of that bond and not borrow against your own money right now to make smaller investments. We can do these larger investments as a part, go back to the one with the money breakouts. One of those targeted investment areas for $40 million could be to LED every classroom in the building, whether or not the building gets a major facelift. And we can pay for that without having to borrow against it. And I'm going to tell you, I ran that business. The risk in that business is we have to use less to pay down the thing that we borrow from. There's a devil in the detail that says you really can't run games on Friday nights, you gotta run them on Saturdays, because you don't want to use the electricity of what it costs to light up Gary Berry on a Friday night. I don't know if we are ready to be accountable to keeping our systems that tight and having to borrow against that. My recommendation, had I been there that evening, and I apologize for having a prior engagement, would not for us to pursue a actual relationship where we borrow against our savings. I think we add to that project list a significant amount of money that says sustainability has to be reached in every one of these projects. First of all, it's how people design right now anyway, but secondly, it's the cheapest way for us to get there and the least risk for us in the 20 plus years that it takes us to pay off that potential relationship that I did bring to the board. So I'm telling you that my recommendation on that earlier piece that says let's borrow against our potential utility savings, I would say let's double down on the bond and let's actually buy the car instead of leasing the equipment.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it. This is a good time to have this conversation. We are going for a RFP for a communications contract as well. So that will set us up in the right way to communicate all the good things that are happening in the district and earn the trust of our community as well if we are going to go for a bond a year from now. And I will say one thing about the Jenkins project that is going on. I've been visiting Jenkins quite a bit. I've not been as engaged with Palmer. The amount of work that has gone on to Jenkins and the community feedback we got in February and March, and you were there at all those town hall meetings when we had screaming parents who didn't have the trust, and now talking to the same parents who didn't have the trust and know that the students are coming back to 6th and 7th grade at Jenkins and they are all happy with the current project, how Jenkins has renovated. That's something that every child in our school district deserves, what they are getting at Jenkins and Palmer. That's the conversation that we are having now. So let's talk about the bond. Is there any feedback from the board? What the ask from the administration, from Superintendent Gall, is even though the composition of this board is going to change after November, that at this point in time, at least we task the superintendent and his staff to come up with a plan. What this is going to look like in that $300 million bucket and 250 and the 100. And that is going to require some runway, engagement with the community, have some town hall type of meetings with each quadrant of the community and see the facility index and which are the schools that need that kind of rebuild or the modernization that is out there. So that's what we, through this work session, we can task the superintendent to perform that work and come back to the board, whether it's going to be this board or 3 months from now, a new board.
Well, I was just to say, it's always good to be informed about your facility needs and what money can make, how it can make a difference for your schools. I certainly support that, but I've always supported bond. I'm more concerned about the withdrawal of support for the energy sustainability plan and what we can affect that change now and start seeing savings now. So that may be the secondary conversation though.
Yeah, I think I wanna, just to clarify the statement, I don't withdraw the support, I shift the support to a different funding mechanism. Nothing disturbs me more than seeing the amount of money we do spend on the costs for our buildings, but I think it's better that we own that than we borrow that. It was a real challenge to convince myself and the board and the community that we should borrow against our MLO to actually make an investment at Palmer and to be able to do the other repairs that we've done. We are upside down in what it costs us to keep this district afloat, and we have been managing on very thin ice for a very long time. I am all in on sustainability. I want 21st century spaces. I want programmable controls that we actually run extremely tight. I just know that I was in this business, and what we don't have is the massive amount of utility spend to actually save on. And again, when I was in this business, it's all about controlling the amount of conditioned air. That's where you spend most of your money, which is in your air-conditioned space. Trimming those schedules and keeping them tight and keeping those systems efficient is how you save the money to borrow against it. Our challenge is, even though we are 98% now in elementary schools because of the West piece, That's not where a district spends its money. It spends its money when you have a fully air-conditioned Coronado, a fully air-conditioned Doherty, a fully air-conditioned Palmer, and a fully air-conditioned Mitchell. Because those are the places that you're spending, believe it or not, over $10,000 a month on an electricity bill. That we don't have right now. So we don't really have the amount of savings to put on the table to borrow against it. That was actually a limitation when we entered into that energy audit that said, we don't have a big chunk that's gonna be an easy savings space. The piece that was presented to us is what I would call a mid-tier opportunity that is easily absorbable in this type of a bond project. And if the bond fails, that offer still is able to be refreshed to say the community doesn't want to make this type of investment, but we do want to lower our utility costs and be able to borrow against it. I think the hard part for me is, I don't know if I want to, if I use an example, LED light an entire building, that then I come in a year later with actual cash that isn't borrowed cash that says, no, I'm going to retrofit the building. So I don't want to lead with an LED light setting that then says I'm gonna redo the entire hallway anyway. Because it's so much cheaper if I'm gonna put LED lights in Palmer. If I put LED lights in Palmer, the 1939 building right now, A&P and Perkins and Eastman is just gonna redo all that. We gotta wait to get the bond piece first to add in those smaller pieces. That's my recommendation. I don't wanna be unsupportive of sustainability. I want it to be a main theme, safety, sustainability, 21st century learning spaces. I think that's a package that works for our internal community and our external community instead of, and again, I brought it, we were piecemealing our way. If you add these dollars up, go back to the bonding slide, we're asking for more than basically all of El Paso County, the map, more than everybody else has done in combination. Because we have the oldest system. We're asking for $750 million that says everybody will be sustainable, not what can we borrow against to get a small amount of savings at a small amount of time. So I certainly understand that you've been a champion for this for a long time and I appreciate it. What I'm asking for is not a loss, but a pause where it's a more efficient use of our dollar than us extending a more borrowed space for the district to be that I don't know if we can actually achieve those savings to pay it off. It'll be very convoluted. There's this thing called a baseline that you set on what your usage is. As soon as we make a bond adjustment to that building, we got to readjust that baseline. And again, I was on the other side of that. The district is going to lose on the readjustment of that baseline. That's how those companies make sure they get their payback. Anybody who leased a car that says they're only going to drive it 10,000 miles a year always drives it more than that and has to write a check at the end. So I just don't want to pay for it twice, Director Rock.
Dr. K.
Can I just, because it's been a few months, can I just articulate back what I believe you to be saying, and then can you or Dr. Comfort tell me where I mess it up? So the company that we had talked to at the end of last year, the basic mechanism is, okay, we're going to go into debt to fund a series of kind of utility investments. There are certain money-back guarantees that they were able to promise us. What I understand you to be telling me is that number one, going into debt under our current situation with Palmer and everything else is dicey. And number two, they're going to levy constraints on our operations. You use the example of, putting games on a Friday night and they'll tell us no in order to be in fulfillment with the contract. They gotta be at a different time.
They won't tell us no, it just changes our usage versus our baseline. So you run the risk of paying for it twice. You're gonna borrow against the savings that is guaranteed if you follow these steps. And then as you change your usage, and or even as rates go up, this is the classic 401k. If I could, every time I get my 401k, it says I can retire in 8 years. And every year I get a new graph that says in 8 more years I can retire. The projected usage rate is dependent upon how our operations changes. I will compliment Dr. Comfort and Chief Odom last year on the incredible ability of our facilities team to keep things running. But many of our buildings run in a condition that I just called in hand. The engineer comes in the morning, they turn the building on. We run protocols over the winter time that says we are going to have an extreme cold event. We know which buildings that we will run all weekend long to make sure they're ready Monday for school. Because yes, utility costs are high, but educational opportunities for kids are more important than that said utility cost. When you enter into these deals, when you make that decision, that costs us because that's a savings that doesn't come. That's how we buy and leverage for that equipment is from that projected savings. If we were not talking about a bond, I'd be the first guy to sign up on it because we have to modernize our buildings. And if the board decides to not go for a bond, then bring that contract in, you'll have my full support. But if we're going to go for a bond, it makes no sense to lease the car when we're getting ready to buy the lot, if that makes sense.
Right, so then your claim is, since we're going for a bond, we just have that as one of our investments and we just pay for it outright.
Yes.
Yes.
Gotcha.
That's what he's. And this is kind of tied into that bond conversation. And at that point in time, we will have a better understanding as to what are the schools. I think this came up even in that meeting when we discussed this renewable energy solutions, that we got to be cognizant of which are the schools that are going to be impacted by the bond and then not have to touch that building twice. Or if areas of the building are going to be torn down or renovated, things of that nature. But we don't end up investing.
The size of this bond, if we were going for a smaller bond and we were only gonna impact a few schools, we could do the energy work at the other schools. We could do both. This bond is going to touch every single school. So again, it doesn't make sense to do work to then touch that building. I would have to tell the company every building is off limits because every building is going to get work. Now, we don't quite yet know what every building would get, but we're gonna modernize every single building. We're not gonna spend $750 million and say, well, we didn't get to LED lights at Henry Elementary. Like, that's not a feasible option.
Dr. Banks, you had something. Okay, so the feedback that Superintendent Gall wanted, is the board at this time supportive of the administration pursuing this opportunity, engaging with the community and coming together with a comprehensive plan that they can then present to this board or the next board. These are going to be the specific projects that are going to result out of that $750 million investment. Is there, that's what he wants. And Superintendent Gall, is that $750 million, is that something set, or is that like a moving target? Can we go from 500 and then maybe even 800?
I think the right way to think about it is the amount of impact that the board wants to look at the projects, not the dollar figure. We'll let the community give us the feedback on the $8 per month per 100,000. We are in a unique position that we have the most bonding capacity of any district in the city. The other strategy is to pass a smaller one several years in a row. The way I look at it is if you think that you've got the yes vote, you should go for everything that you need now and then actually hold yourselves accountable to it there afterwards. So I think that the next step is, if directed by the board, for us to now put some more depth into that to show you all how is it that every school in the system is benefiting from that opportunity and what that looks like. And we want to get to a place that if the board then goes for a ballot initiative on it, that we're not just talking pie in the sky, that we have the renderings. Again, when I talk about Palmer, the Palmer project just looks a lot different with the vision on the construction fence than just an empty lot when you drive by the construction fence. We have to show people what we think that investment will look like. And just as I looked at the Jenkins thing, I said, I love the layout, you gotta change the exterior because it looks boring.
And a year from now, it won't just be a rendering on a fence, it'll be the actual building. So people can walk into that building and see the fence that has happened out there.
I like it. I think you go for, somewhere around that big chunk and get it all going. I think about people that have younger kids, like myself, right? I could be investing and looking at how to make my neighborhood middle school, cool with this bond, and my wife can work at the elementary school, and you can have that multiple level buy-in of, hey, we're a feeder school to Coronado, so let's go look at the Coronado one too, and know what our kids will get in X amount of years. So I think bringing the community in to say, how do you want Coronado to look? How do you want Edison or Russell or whatever it is to look? I think that's cool. I think that
Dr.
that's a good
Comfort
way.
shared the heat wave the week before school started. Well, that happened to be PD week. And when I was in buildings, I was thanking staff for, particularly at the high school, putting up with not really workable workspaces. And
That
said
was
to,
without kids' bodies in the building.
right, that was without kids generating BTUs.
Yeah, exactly.
So I hear
You got my
support from
thumbs
you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Yeah, and I see
Supporting?
Director Kim. Yeah, supporting, what we are asking right now, we are not making
Got it.
decisions other than asking the superintendent to come up with a clear plan, engage with the community as we go through this process and developing that plan, and come up with
Yep.
a solution in front of the board, whether it's going to be 2 or 3 months from now with this board or the next board,
I'm in.
to make the decision, potentially to go for a 2026 bond at that time. I think you have the full support of the, this, and then the sustainability piece of it, if you can also make that part of that bond,
Absolutely.
and in one of those buckets up there. Okay, I think that,
Thank you, Dr. Comfort.
that concludes the discussion for the work session today. Just letting the board know and also trying to get your feedback. Next week, 27th is going to be a board retreat. I think, Ms. Olson, the location is going to be that CSST building.
Yes, they have an Outlook invite and address in the Outlook.
Okay, great. So it's going to be in that Exponential Impacts building.
Wait, to be clear, is it in the exponential impact space or in the new CSST space?
CSST.
And so the entrance is the back side of the building.
Okay.
So if you go either on the north or the south part of that building, you can get to the back side, you'll see the rocket, and you'll see the stairs and the ramp that go in there. You can actually get there from the inside, but that's a lot harder than just driving around back.
Okay, one of the things that we will certainly talk about is policies that the board wants to address this academic year. What are the policies? If there is anything else that the board particularly want to address during that board retreat, it's an opportunity for the board. If you already have an idea, you can share right now at the space, or if you need a couple of days to think over it, if you can get back to me by Friday, you can send that email to me and Director Hafley, just letting us know so that we can prepare adequately, and if we need some external support to drive that conversation, we can have that external support as well. So I'll open up that conversation for a couple of minutes now. Is there anything specific you are looking for at the retreat next week as a board?
You mentioned policy update, so I
Yeah.
think that's, if
Yeah.
there's.
Yeah, so as a board, please take a look at what you want to bring to the table, and we can have a robust conversation about that.
We do have to have, Casby emailed today about the policy.
Immigration policy.
Yeah.
I'm aware of it. I got that thing. I forwarded that to Dr. X and Chief Otmer as well. So was there a specific policy itself they provided?
I believe so.
Okay, great. Let them take a look at it and bring a recommendation to the board. What Director Ott is talking about is state law that requires us to adopt an immigration policy. And
By
the deadline is
September
September 1st.
Yes.
I don't know if, probably the earliest we can do is that September 3rd of third meeting, so hopefully that's compliant enough. Okay, anything else other than policies yeah,
I'd like to have a conversation about the length of our meetings and protocol for keeping things moving efficiently. We are continuously on regular meetings going into, actual discussion of actions items like 3 hours into the meeting, and it's just not reasonable to expect people to do useful thinking at 8 p.m.
Keyword, frequency of meetings.
We are better than we were when I first joined.
Yeah.
Still work to do.
I mean, a lot of times board members have to monitor themselves in that
I know.
regard, so, but we can
I'm
certainly
just saying
have a
I'd like to
discussion.
have a conversation about it.
Sure. Okay. Anything else?
Is this the TASB one you're talking about?
Yeah.
I think we could just review our roadmap for academic excellence for our, our priority of improved student outcomes is, we're getting better on the access to high quality instruction and maybe having a brief from Superintendent Gall on, the good pulse we've gotten so far and where we're going and just kind of having that.
Yeah, so we're scheduled to give you our spotlight on September 3rd will be our academic strategy at depth, and then September 10th work session will be a review of last year's data.
Okay.
So that's already scheduled.
Is there anything Superintendent Gall wants to brief us on?
I will be out that week. I have a personal thing to attend to, so I will not be there, but my staff will be there to support the needs of the board during the retreat.
But is there anything from your perspective that you want the board to be talking about at
Nope.
the retreat? Okay,
It's the board's retreat.
okay.
Do we want to look at the middle school accountability stuff or is that forthcoming still?
That's something Director Carey and Director Hafley, were you guys at the end of last year talking about, did you meet with,
We met with the area superintendents.
okay. So maybe you can give us an update as to,
There hasn't been anything that
Okay.
we've been made aware of since that particular.
We'll bring an update after the first marking period to the board as part of a normal work session.
okay,
We just don't have enough instructional days to have
Yeah.
anything different than what we briefed you of our intent last year.
Yeah, we were mostly in the room kind of giving feedback on some of their initial ideas. What they did with that feedback, I don't know.
okay, think about it in the next couple of days. If you want anything else brought up, send me a note, email or text, and then we can, if it's possible, let me know by Friday, so prepare accordingly for that Wednesday board retreat, starting at 4:00 now, okay? And if we need to additionally discuss the board vacancy after the vote, then we'll talk about it at that point in time. Okay.
Before you adjourn, there's two emails that I want to bring your attention to. One is the straw poll from this evening that Chief Ottmer sent us, and also I sent you one, I believe it was on Friday, for the board self-evaluation that we need by the 25th, so we can have the results on the 27th at the retreat.
That's going to be part of the board retreat discussion as well.
So if you haven't done it yet,
Get it done.
get it done. I think it's on email from Friday the 15th,
Yeah, that's due by Monday.
the 25th.
Yeah. The self-evaluation is due by Monday, the straw poll by tomorrow 12. Okay, with that, we are adjourned at 7:10. We didn't
5K on Saturday.
Wow, is there-
5K on Saturday.